Chapter 24:18. These words were unpleasant to hear, but the old witch was old after all. Her self-restraint was amazing. Of course, she did not have the qualifications to lose her temper. What do you mean? Qing Xian sneered. In the cultivation world, there is never a future waiting for you. There is only hope to fight for. What are you afraid of? Hiding in a corner like the filthy earth for millions of years? Afraid of being beaten up when you go out? Being robbed? Being looked down upon? The heavenly Tao has given you millions of years to go out and see the world and truly integrate yourselves with the mainstream of cultivation. From now on, you will have me, and he will have me. This is the true foothold in the cultivation world. The smoke puppet behind her curled her lips and transmitted to Shishi, "You have me, and I have him. I am afraid that in the end, it will become your Taoist." Shishi laughed dryly. An analogy, an analogy. In fact, everyone will become relatives. Qing Xian turned back and glared at the two, then turned back and continued to deceive. The real eternity is only one point: integration. Integration into the mainstream. In this integration, strengthen yourself and accept others, instead of closing the door here and thinking that you are the orthodox of heaven and earth. Instead of relying on a wisp of purple gas to obtain eternal peace. This kind of thinking is not true of cultivation. The change of era gave you one last chance. If you don't go out, you will never be able to go out again. The earth will become history, and you leaders will be the sinners of the earth. The smoke puppet behind her continued to quietly complain, avoiding the important and dwelling on the trivial, pointing at the sky and painting a pie. Now you think about it, what's the use of going out? Tens of thousands of years ago was more like it. If you go out now, you will die faster. Shishi smiled. It's not death, it's integration. You have me, and in the end, you will become me. The old witch looked at him quietly, still calm. Good mouth. But I want to know now, is it possible that you all have good intentions, destroying my earth purple gas for a better future? Qing Xian looked at him calmly. Tao friend, it hasn't been destroyed yet. You can't use things that haven't happened to judge the future. This is too wishful thinking. The old witch stared at him. You have said so much. I understand the meaning behind it. If after this incident, Guardian Lu is fine and the purple gas is normal, then we will definitely consider what you said, including walking out of this world, including not cooperating with the ancient bloodline immortal lineage anymore. However, if either Escort Lu or Purple Chi is injured, then there is no possibility of continuing. We all understand this. The old cultivator closed his eyes and didn't say anything. Obviously, he was tired of the Taoist preaching. As an old cultivator who had lived for over 10,000 years, he had his own wisdom and wouldn't be so easily persuaded by a few words. Qing Xian's expression did not change. She did not feel bored by her words at all. Behind her, Yin Xiong mocked. What? He didn't succeed? Had he been seen through? It's obviously a dead end, yet you still want to waste your breath. It was all a fluke. Just wait. Once little E destroys the purple clouds, it will naturally be simple. We still have to go through this. However, Shishi had a different opinion. Not necessarily. At the very least, he had planted a thorn in the old man's heart. Sooner or later, I'll make him uneasy. Qing Xian chuckled. This old man's condition seems a little impossible, but might not be so. Lily will be fine. That's for sure. I don't think that strand of purple gas can do anything either. Maybe everything will be fine? Yin Xiong did not believe. Impossible. Little Li would never come out empty-handed in such a situation. Even in the cave, he would have taken advantage of it, let alone this strand of purple gas. Qing Xian was unfathomable. You're wrong. There's a problem. If a bandit found a landlord's gold vault, what would he do? There are two ways. The bandit would take it all in one go, and it would be gone. In the future, it might even attract the attention of the authorities. But the old bandit wouldn't do that. He would secretly dig a hole under the gold vault and steal a bit at a time. He wouldn't reveal anything. This way, the landlord would continue to put it in while the old bandit would quietly move it out. Not only would he get more, the authorities wouldn't even know who did it. Little E, is it a bandit or an old bandit? Shishi chuckled. Of course it's an old bandit who can't be any older, and that strand of purple gas is too powerful. He can't swallow it. Malu, what you mean is we can reconcile with them and then dig a hole. Qing Xian did not admit it. What hole? It's a hole they dug for themselves, okay? It's just that it's too old and they can't climb out anymore. We still have to be prepared for battle. I see that these ancestral shamans are hovering between life and death inside. It's hard to say how much fighting power they have left. But once little E can come out, we have to hold him back. We must not commit a massacre in the earth. Don't look at the strength of the cultivators here. They involve a lot of people. If we don't handle it well, we'll be stained with shit. Shishi nodded. Yinsheng was still a little confused. Isn't this place forgotten by the mainstream cultivation world? What kind of trouble can there be? Qing Xian explained. The cultivators of the earth aren't troublesome. The troublesome thing is that strand of purple gas. It's one of the 13 strands of purple gas when the chaos first opened. I heard from the ancient records that there's a saying that the 3 strands of purple gas transformed from 3 of the 13 strands of purple gas. Then what does this strand of purple gas that didn't transform mean? Is it the 4th Hong Hong Mao or something else? No one can say for sure. But no matter how you look at it, since it's the land transformed by the 13 strands of purple gas, it's best to let it live and die on its own. We can play the side drum and come up with some good ideas. Just don't go into battle personally. The outcome is unpredictable. Killing the ancient blood ancestral shamans is an advantage. Quit while you're ahead. That's the right thing to do. Of course, in the end, we have to solve the problem of the ancestral shamans targeting us. Otherwise, we have countless things to do. Who will always guard against them? Yinsheng was interested. Regarding the origin of the universe, there were some unknown secrets. No orthodoxy was clearer than the orthodox Taoism, like the 3 pure ones. 13 strands of purple gas. 4 of them became the rules of the 4 strands of heaven and earth. What about the other 9 strands? Shishi answered her. As far as I know, there are many versions. But the version that's faintly circulated at the highest level of Taoism is 1 strand of time, 1 strand of space, 1 strand of celestial phenomenon, 1 strand of life, 1 strand of the 36 days, 1 strand of the past, 1 strand of the present, 1 strand of the future. As for the last strand, I don't know. There are many different opinions, and no conclusion can be reached. Qing Xian nodded. Well, Taoism circulation in this aspect is similar. Of course, Buddhism is another saying. There's no need to delve into it. Yinsheng was a little confused. It's messed up. It's all messed up. The strand of life should be the Tao of creation, right? The strand of celestial phenomenon should be the 5 elements. If that's the case, time, space, 5 elements, and creation should be respected in the innate Tao. But the fact is morality, fate, and karma have been squeezed into it. What's the reason? Qing Xian sighed. Morality, fate, karma, they're all the Tao of life. The more prosperous the human race is, the more needs there are in this aspect. In fact, many of the theories of cultivation at the beginning of heaven and earth are vague and even contradictory. This isn't strange because cultivation only started gradually from ancient times. The ancient times are a mystery to everyone. Without personal experience, who can say it clearly? Chapter 24:19. P.S. Sir D. Duo is on the shelf today. Please help him. Lu Xiaoyi's will of the sword continued to rise as he killed more and more people. Was there an upper limit to the will? No one knew. How to measure it? Lu Xiaoyi knew. Let's see who you kill. Of course, it was definitely not a demigod, because the number of demigods that were killed had almost exceeded 4 digits. It could no longer be used as a standard to measure his will. The legs of the ordinary ancestral witches were weak. The scene of vitality when they were reborn was no longer there. Messing around, dragging their feet, reluctantly, and making do with each other. This was the current reality of the ancestral magi. They did not dare to stop. They were afraid that the swordsman would destroy the purple gas. When would it end? They knew that the hope was getting slimmer and slimmer, but the ancestral witches still tried their best to persevere. The meaning of perseverance was that the swordsmen would collapse due to exhaustion. They no longer expected to achieve results in the battle, including the 6 fresh troops. The result was the same when the ancient blood ancestral witches rushed forward. It did not reflect the uniqueness of the ancient blood celestial species. The most fatal thing was that there was a crack between the ordinary ancestral witches and the ancient blood ancestral witches. The reason was simple. The ordinary ancestral witches rushed in twice in such a difficult situation, but the ancient blood ancestral witches only went in once. Everything was slow. The rebirth was slow, and the action was slow. The ancient blood ancestral witches could not be blamed because they still needed to guard against the 3 Taoists outside the prayer wheel. However, the ordinary ancestral witches would not think so. They would only think that these ancient blood celestial species were not willing to fight to the death and disregard the safety of the earth. The position was different. The goal was different. The focus of the action was different. This was the meaning of Qing Xian and the other 2 taking the risk to stand here. Even if they didn't do anything, they still affected something. Without a specific strategy, Lu Xiaoyi did what he should do based on his intuition, and so did Qing Xian and the other 2. Their intuition and accurate judgment in a complex environment slowly began to lead the situation in their favor after the initial chaos. This was something that had been tempered through countless life and death situations. It couldn't be taught or learned. It could only be experienced by oneself. When you experience it and survive it, all of these experiences can help you get on the right path in a complicated situation. Lu Xiaoyi no longer had a sword in his hand. He had already put the 7 ants back in his mud ball. With the support of his sword intent, he himself was a sword, the sharpest sword. The ancestral sorcerers that were charging towards them started to scatter. This was because the ancient blood ancestral sorcerers wanted to protect themselves, and because the ordinary ancestral sorcerers were exhausted. The less people he killed, the slower the increase in his will of sword Tao. This was something that couldn't be forced. From the beginning until now, he had killed more than 1,000 ancestral shamans. On average, each ancestral shaman was killed 20 to 30 times. With such a high frequency, even half immortals couldn't withstand it. The first spurt of energy had been exhausted, and now the second was weakening, and the third was about to be exhausted. At this moment, he felt that his will of sword Tao had reached an unprecedented height. It was the peak of his more than 3,000 years of cultivation. In the foreseeable future, it might be difficult to have such a coincidence to help him condense his will of sword Tao. This was a rare opportunity. He focused his consciousness in the direction of the purple gas and brazenly stabbed it. No one dared to be so reckless. It could even be said that it was a brainless performance. He didn't know what would happen if he stabbed the purple gas. The collapse of the prayer wheel was inevitable, and the consequences would be the huge Earth continent and the countless humans living on it. But he couldn't hold it back. There must be such a stab. It was also his last attempt. The purple gas trembled slightly under the will of sword Tao. The entire prayer wheel spun crazily as if it had lost its speed. Except for Lu Xiaoyi, all the ancestral sorcerers of Earth, excluding the ancient blood, were thrown out by the powerful centrifugal force. Then, they could no longer enter. Dozens of ancestral sorcerers silently watched the prayer while spinning crazily on the verge of losing its speed. It was so fast that it seemed like the historical totems were about to be thrown out. Would it be the end of the ancient Earth continent? There were already ancestral sorcerers who looked at the 3 of them with hatred. They couldn't do anything to Lu Xiaoyi, but at least they could do something to his friends. Qing Xian spread out his hands and made an apologetic gesture. Wait a little longer? Control your ancestral sorcerers. They shouldn't be impulsive when they should be, and not be calm when they should be calm. It's just a little longer. His eyes turned cold. Please forgive me for being blunt. Your decision will determine the future of the Earth continent. The old ancestral sorcerer turned his head with difficulty. In the prayer wheel, there were fluctuations of spiritual vigor from the dead cultivators and the vitality of the cultivators when they were reborn. One after another, it was endless. It was obvious that the swordsman had killed the 6 ancient blood ancestral sorcerers in the prayer wheel. No one knew how he did it, but he could control these people to only be reborn in the prayer wheel. Then rebirth was death. They went through such a terrifying cycle of life and death in the crazy rotation. The old ancestral sorcerer covered his face in pain, but he could not block out the aura of death that kept coming out. He regretted it. If he could do it all over again, he would never agree with these ancient blood ancestral sorcerers to provoke this perverted madman, including his friends. Only those who had experienced it personally would know how terrifying this person was. Other than the immortals from the upper realm, no one could control this swordsman. What should he do? In such anxiety, the Taoist priest's gentle voice sounded in his ears like a devil. A depressed person only sees difficulties, but an optimist will always see hope. Why did he only throw you out? Why did he only leave those ancient blood ancestral sorcerers? Does this represent some kind of attitude? Since he has such an attitude, maybe it means that he doesn't have the intention to kill all of the Earth Continent sorcerers. Since he doesn't want to kill all of them, then there shouldn't be any problems with the purple chi. If you think this way, won't you feel better in your heart? The old ancestral sorcerer was confused and nodded involuntarily. What else could he think other than this? There was no point in killing these 3 Taoists now. The key was that the purple chi could not be damaged. The Earth Continent could not be destroyed in the hands of their generation. Behind him, Yansheng secretly transmitted a message. I think that this is purely because Little E didn't have the confidence to take down all of the Earth Continent sorcerers, so he could only steal from the ancient blood ancestral sorcerers who were the biggest threat. Are they stupid? How can they believe such a shallow lie? Qing Xian was speechless. Senior sister, great aunt, can you not speak the truth? Beside him, Shishi laughed. A drowning person will grab onto even a stalk of grass tightly. Can a straw save them? No, it is a kind of spiritual sustenance. Senior sister, when people are helpless, they will always look for such sustenance. You have to understand them. Chapter 24:20. As the ancestral sorcerer of Earth waited anxiously, the prayer wheel finally began to slow down and became normal. Only when the prayer wheel gradually returned to normal did they finally feel the aura of the purple chi. The custodian was above. The aura of the purple chi was still the same. It seemed like there was no change. Of course, they still needed time to enter the prayer wheel and experience it carefully. But on the wall of the prayer wheel, there were 6 more totems, 6 legends, 6 pieces of history. The history of the ancient blood ancestral sorcerer. They were left here forever, dying before their ambitions were realized, often causing the ancestral sorcerer to cry. Because they were celestial seeds, it was impossible to erase their traces. They could only become a part of the countless murals on the wall of the prayer wheel as a consolation. Of course, you could also see these murals as a warning. Things seemed to be developing in a good direction. The ancestral sorcerer of Earth revealed a relieved expression. Qing Xian suddenly thought of a problem. Fellow Taoist, can you get Xiaoyi out? The old sorcerer of Earth bowed deeply. The changes during this period of time had made him physically and mentally exhausted, although the situation did not seem to worsen. But, little friend Qing Xian, the prayer wheel is controlled by the purple chi. What we can do is useless in front of the purple chi. If we could get the custodian out, wouldn't we have done it long ago? Would we still dare to leave him inside to overturn the rivers and seas? We just can't get him out. Little friend, don't worry. We are more anxious than you. I will go in now, kowtow to the custodian, and confess my sins. I will not give up until I get the custodian out. I'm just afraid that the custodian does not know how to get out. That would be, for millions of years, only the ancestral sorcerer of Earth could enter and exit the prayer wheel freely. No one else could. Outsiders could only enter through the Qizheng Pure Land. There were a few in history, but they never came out. Of course, they did not have the ability of Lu Xiaoyi, not to mention the purple chi. They could not even cause any harm to the prayer wheel. The ancestral sorcerer of Earth were much more polite to Qing Xian and the other two. This was human nature, because they were afraid that fierce Lu would cause trouble in the prayer wheel again. If he did it again, they would not even have the strength to stop him. But before they could enter, there was a flash of light on the prayer wheel. A figure had already swayed out. With his hands behind his back, he quietly looked at the dozens of Edo Earth Grand Shamans without saying a word. Silence was often more frightening than sternness. No one could blame the ancestral sorcerers of the earth for being cowardly and lacking the demeanor of a major cultivator. No one would be able to remain unyielding after being killed more than 30 times. Integrity needed to be supported by strength. Tens of ancestral magi had died thousands of times in his hands. Even the fiercest ancestral magi had lowered their heads under his calm gaze. No one dared to look him in the eye. In the universe cultivation world, no one had ever heard of a similar precedent to make a half-immortal of a realm submit to him. He was not pretending, but he was nervously communicating with Qing Xian and the other two. The communication method was like this. She said, "Sage Astra's tea stick, you actually entered a treasure mountain and returned empty-handed? Is this still you? Hurry up and peel off that human skin. I want to see who dares to impersonate you." Lu Xiaoyi said, "Hee, return empty-handed? How is that possible? It's just that it's not good to go too far in public. If word gets out, my reputation will be ruined. Don't worry, since we know the whereabouts of the treasure, it will be mine sooner or later. This time, let's make a mark first." Yin Chen said, "Xiaoyi, how did you know we came here?" Lu Xiaoyi said, "How would I know? I don't have eyes. I just thought you guys were dead and came here to show some goodwill. Pretending to take revenge is good enough for you guys. I originally came here to take a look, but I didn't expect to fall into a trap. You actually used purple gas to tempt me? Am I someone who can resist temptation?" Qing Xian said, "Xiaoyi, my opinion is that there is no need to kill them. They are not the main culprits. The key is the ancient blood immortal. These people's minds have been taken away. After this, they will not have the face to face us. Such an opponent is not to be feared. There is no need to add more karma to ourselves." Lu Xiaoyi said, "You guys don't care, so why should I care? Let's be frank, how do we bury the pit? Throw them out?" She said, "Ma Lu is done fooling. I think this time the Filth Earth cultivators will not be able to escape. I hope they can last until the end of the era." Lu Xiaoyi said, "Isn't that right? I already said that among the four of us, the most shameless and sinister one is this gigolo. He really doesn't have good intentions." Yin Chen said, "Xiaoyi, is it fun in the prayer wheel? I want to go in and take a look too." Lu Xiaoyi said, "Sure. Senior sister, where can't you go? Even if it is the immortal court, I will dig a hole for you to hide in. When we go in later, we can also see the history of the ancient Filth Earth. Treat it as my treat. Isn't it just a prayer wheel? Treat it as your own home." Qing Xian said, "You can already control purple gas? How could it be so brazen? Don't you know how to restrain yourself?" Lu Xiaoyi said, "Qing Xian, you are too cautious, so cautious that you are petty. Even if I don't do anything, they won't think of anything. They will also be careful, and their thoughts will fly. After the matter, who knows where they will connect to? Since that is the case, I might as well be open and above board. I can. Actually, it can't be said to be control. How can that thing be controlled? I just learned the long history of the Filth Earth and was treated as one of us." Qing Xian said in disdain, "Who are you trying to fool? This prayer wheel has cheated many people. You don't even see the purple gas, and you treat them as Filth Earth cultivators." Lu Xiaoyi said seriously, "I am not lying to you. It is just that I have killed many ancestral shamans, so I am like a chef in a dog meat restaurant. You know, actually, the few of them were very clear that the reason why they had to go in was to destroy the confidence of the Filth Earth cultivators and make them think that the Filth Earth continent was no longer a natural barrier. It was not because they liked this place, and were willing to find a way out for the people here. It was because they were very clear that the ancestral shamans might give up, but the ancient blood immortals would definitely not. In the future, the ancient blood immortals would continue to fuse with the ancestral shamans of the filth earth. There should be a few ancient blood immortals still alive. Such a threat could not be ignored. Since they could not kill all the ancestral shamans here to prevent future trouble, they could only let them open the realm gate and walk out. Their purpose was nothing more than to wait for the ancient blood immortals to come down and eradicate them immediately. This was actually not the main reason why they were merciful. Shishi was very depressed. Why do you think heaven's eyes intervened in this matter? When these ancient blood immortals attacked, they did not stand up. Now that it is our turn to fight back, they started to side with us? Chapter 24-21. Tian Mao came out to stop them. The four of them were members of Tian Mao and had to listen to the orders of the organization. Of course, Tian Mao also promised them that such a situation would not happen again. Ancient Blood Immortal would not attack them again. But as people from the Fifth Ring, they would not believe in other people's promises, so they had to have their own means. Driving the Earth Shamans to the main world was one of the steps. After a short silence, Lu Xiaoyi finally opened his mouth, but it was not to the Earth Shamans, but to his friends. The long scroll of scriptures, the scenery of foreign lands, the changes of the universe, and the totems of people are all in the prayer wheel. Friends from afar, why don't you come with me to take a look? The cold tube is despicable and one-sided. It's just a joke. Qing Xian and the other two pretended to thank their master, and the four of them stepped into the tube together. The four of them behaved as if this was their own place. They entered naturally, but this shocked the ancestral sorcerers. Other than the Earth Shamans, no one else could enter the prayer wheel. The reason why they could enter was because they had been praying piously in front of the prayer wheel since they built their foundation. Only by praying from foundation establishment to half immortal did they have the qualification to enter. What happened now? The prayer wheel had become someone else's? Despicable? One-sided? Just a joke? The old shaman gritted his teeth. All of you go in. See what they are looking at. Also, whether the purple gas is intact or not needs to be observed closely. The Earth Shamans did not care about their physical and mental exhaustion and entered in a single file. A mistake would lead to eternal regret, and it would take more than 100 years for them to regret. This matter was not over yet. With Lu Xiaoyi's experience in the universe, how could he raise it so high and let it go so easily? The prayer wheel was suddenly filled with half-immortals. In the long scroll of history, they could not travel together, so they could only go their own way. The four Fifth Ring bandits wandered back and forth in the core of the Earth Shamans, picking and pointing. The only thing they had in common was that they did not treat themselves as outsiders. To be honest, the scripture rotating scroll was not of much use in increasing their strength. But at their level, broadening their horizons was far more important than simply increasing their strength. This was because the foundation of the Tao was to stand high, see far, and see wide, compatible and complemented each other, all rivers flowing into the sea. As for what everyone would gain from it, Lu Xiaoyi could only lead them in. As for what they could steal after entering, that would depend on the abilities of each bandit. Even thieves had their own principles. A great thief would lead a small thief, but thieves were different. They could see a lot of things, not to mention the history of the entire Eddy lands, the direction of inheritance, core concepts, the origin of witchcraft, and so on. There were no secrets here. It was hard to imagine that these guys would find such a place to trap their enemies. However, the purple energy inside the prayer wheel was a mystery to them. No one could touch it all. This was also what the ancestral shamans of Earth could feel. The purple chi was indeed fine. There was no change compared to before. It was as if nothing had happened. But the more normal it was, the more abnormal it was. Otherwise, how could Escort Lu be able to walk out on his own? Now, he had turned this place into his own territory and started to act as a tour guide. Did the purple chi betray him? Abducted? Was he being controlled? As the origin of the universe is chaos, how could it be possible? Lu Xiaoyi was in a good mood as he revisited the old place. In fact, he did not experience the real Eddy Lands. But what he saw in the prayer wheel was more than just experience. He knew the Eddy Lands like the back of his hand. The only real benefit was that his sword will had reached a new height, an unimaginable height. It was not easy to compare because it was difficult to find a reference point. He could barely compare it with faith. But Swordwell was not as simple as faith. Faith could strip away the opponent's defensive power. But Swordwell did not target the opponent's defense. Instead, it increased his attack power and made the attack more penetrative. Most importantly, with the support of Swordwell, there was no power in the universe that could make his flying sword lose its effectiveness. From then on, his flying sword was no longer a pure entity or sword energy with the support of Tao State. Instead, it had a kind of spiritual attachment which was sword will. Because of this sword will, it had the power to harm some illusory existences. This was what he often found difficult in the previous battles. Only now did he dare to say that once his flying sword was out, any existence in the world would be within the flying sword's attack range. This was the power of the sword will tablet. After accumulating for a long time, it had reached a sublimation in the prayer wheel. It was also a kind of natural success. However, these were not his gains this time. His true gain was that his will of sword Tao seemed to have gained color. Should such an illusory spiritual concept, like will have color? It should not have, at least in theory. However, it truly existed. Ever since his last stab pierced through this strand of purple chi, he discovered that his sword Tao willpower had gained color. Purple. And it was because of this purple color that he could enter and exit the prayer wheel freely. He could even bring his friends in to see the scenery. Of course, the witches of Eddy Lands did not notice the change in the purple chi, because the energy form of the purple chi did not change at all. The only change was the color. It was slightly lighter and could not be seen with the naked eye. There were many kinds of robbers. Those who emptied the treasury at once were the lowest level. Those who left a back door in the treasury to visit at any time were the higher level. But there was another kind, which was like Lu Xiaoyi. He did not take anything, but when he went out, he turned into a golden color. The specific function had yet to be tested. He did not know if it could be used to establish Tao or directly reflected in combat power. No matter what, it was a principle to make a fortune quietly. In the foreseeable future, the purple chi here would become lighter and lighter. This was for sure. So, he had to move the rich people to another place. After a long time, they would find out. Lu Xiaoyi thought that he still had a bottom line. Did he feel a little embarrassed to take away other people's foundation? This was also the reason why he did not kill them when he came out. It was best not to kill after stealing the goods. Would he feel better? He was also deceiving himself. The prayer wheel this time was filled with peace and friendship. Everyone did not touch each other and felt their own feelings. After a long time, Qing Xian and the other two felt that they had strolled around enough. They sent out a message and were moved out by Lu Xiaoyi. Only then did this trip end. In the sky, dozens of witches of Eddy Lands wanted to cry, but had no tears, because their own treasure did not listen to them and instead helped an outsider. How could they endure this? Lu Xiaoyi still did not say a word. He pretended to be profound. All the contact was done by Qing Xian. In terms of deceiving people, Qing Xian was actually not worse than him. Chapter 24-22. Qing Xian had his hands behind his back. His attitude was gentle, and there was no overbearing posture. However, in the eyes of the ancestral sorcerer of Earth, his attitude was like a wolf who smiled sweetly but ate people without spitting out the bones. The orthodox Taoists were all so insidious and cunning. Did you see that? I told you before that as long as you calm down, there is nothing that can't be solved. You can always find a common point, and there is always a way to get along. Looking at the ancestral sorcerer of Earth who had been defeated, Qing Xian did not want to let them go. It was not because he wanted something, but because this was the rule. Everyone should be responsible for their own actions. Although these ancestral sorcerers did not directly participate, how could he let them go so easily by providing a place, convenience, and even cultivators? These ancestral sorcerers had now lost the will to fight. Their resistance was mercilessly dismembered by Lu Xiaoyi in the prayer wheel, and now only their bodies were left. Since the purple chi of your noble land is worry-free, then I would like to know why you invited the four of us here. The ancestral sorcerer were in a bitter mood. In the end, they could not avoid this. What should come will come, even if they had paid a very high price. The 9 ancient blood ancestral sorcerers were killed, and the prayer wheel may fall into the control of the other party. Even if they paid such a price, they still had to bear the responsibility for their previous actions. The old ancestral sorcerer said bitterly, "Our Earth Sorcerer tribe was careless and let the ancient blood ancestral sorcerer do whatever he wanted. We only have ourselves to blame for the result. But we are not the original sin. Attacking the custodian was just to protect ourselves, and the reason is very clear. In this case, the Earth Sorcerer tribe is willing to be responsible for our previous actions. Please tell us clearly." They were beaten into submission and bowed their heads to admit defeat. It was also a very normal result of a fight between forces. How to claim compensation was a science. Too much is as bad as not enough. Qing Xin pondered and said, "About the possibility of the ancient blood immortals remaining blood fusion. What countermeasures do you have?" The Grand Magus sighed. "Back then, we made an agreement with the ancient blood immortal. We would provide the Grand Magus, and they would plant the immortal seed. If they were lucky enough to become immortals in the end, the resources would belong to both parties. At the time of the agreement, there were about 14 immortals of ancient blood. Because the blood fusion process was not guaranteed to succeed and required various conditions, most of the ancestral sorcerers of the Earth planted blood guides in advance, waiting for the fall of the immortals of ancient blood. Now, among the remaining 30 or so ancestral sorcerers, more than 20 of them have blood guides, which cannot be removed. Therefore, before the new era comes, there should be another 5 immortals of ancient blood who will use this to descend to the lower realm. We have a contract with them, so we can't stop them." Qing Xian looked at them meaningfully. "In other words, you can't stop the immortals from descending? You can't stop me from doing whatever I want after I descend to the lower realm? Would a similar situation happen again in the future? Do we still have to be on guard against possible sneak attacks from ancestral magi at all times? Is that so?" The Grand Shaman's face flushed with anger. They were the weaker party in the agreement with the ancient blood immortal, and they were still the weaker party in the confrontation with the elites of the half-fairy realm from the origin world. Weakness was the original sin of all troubles. Qing Xian pressed on step by step. "If you can't solve it, then you can only rely on our method. Taking drastic measures is an ancient and effective method. What do you think?" Taking drastic measures was to kill all the ancestral sorcerers who had planted blood guides. Don't doubt whether they had the ability to do so. With Escort Lu alone, it was not difficult to do this. Moreover, these 3 Taoists were also difficult to deal with. Against 9 ancestral magi of ancient blood, they could kill 3 of them without any injuries. The ancestral sorcerers of the Earth did not know that heavens, I had given them an order, and this matter had come to an end. Therefore, the threat was real. With Escort Lu's way of doing things, it was not like he had never destroyed a world or a Tao. Now, for his own safety, there was nothing he could not do. The ancestral sorcerers were very clear that they must come up with a practical and feasible method, a method that could completely calm the hearts of these Taoists. It was not because they were afraid of death, but because these 4 Taoists had entered the prayer wheel, which was the real threat. Destroying the core foundation of the Earth. Let's ask you, are you afraid? Of course they were afraid. The Earth may be able to withstand the death of dozens of ancestral sorcerers. But if something happened to the purple chi, it was hard to imagine what the future of the Earth would be like. Could it still cultivate? Would it become a mortal star? If the low-level sorcerers could not survive, how could they talk about the future? The old ancestral sorcerer was in a dilemma. After weighing with the other ancestral sorcerers, they finally came up with their plan. The blood fusion process will be carried out in the prayer wheel. We have been following the agreement, following the blood fusion and the principle of half of the spirit. But if the ancient blood immortals keep thinking about the past, then we can suppress their spirit so that their consciousness will never wake up. In this way, if it is always the consciousness of the ancestral sorcerers, then the so-called end of karma will no longer exist. Fellow Taoist, what do you think of this? Qing Xian. Oh, there is such an application of the prayer wheel. Could it be that he was just being perfunctory? In the contract with the immortals, you can also do such a thing? You don't have to worry that the ancient blood immortals will harm you. The old ancestral sorcerer said bitterly, Fellow Taoist, you think too much. Whether it is true or not. In fact, Escort Liu is very clear. As for the contract, we have agreed to carry it out in the prayer wheel because only in the prayer wheel, the blood fusion process can be protected by the purple qi and life is guaranteed. But if we think about it in reverse, if there is a problem with the purple qi, it is not something we can control, right? After all, the level of the purple qi is too high, at the same level as Sanhong. It is not new that we can't control it. I am afraid that the ancient blood immortals can't do anything. He did not say that even if the ancient blood immortals wanted to do something, they could only find Escort Liu who could affect the purple qi, not them. But this was only a last resort. The best way was to push the blame to the purple qi. Who could force this thing? Qing Xian smiled. It sounds good, and it is a little sincere. But do you know what consequences you will face if you do not abide by such an agreement? Seeing that the old ancestral sorcerer was still there hesitating, Qing Xian's voice gradually became cold. The new era is coming. At that time, countless rising stars and new great Daos will appear in the world. The immortal court will no longer be the original immortal court. There will be many new faces. Then, how many ancient blood immortals do you think will exist? How many Taoists will be born? Going against the promise is standing on the opposite side of the mainstream Taoists. Going against the trend. Before and after the change of the era, the universe will be in chaos. There will be countless things that we do not want to see happen. Do you want to see such things happen in the ancient filthy earth? This is not a threat, but a fact. The truth is the sorcerer race willing to walk with the mainstream or slide to destruction with those forces that are struggling at death's door? We will only give you one chance. Next time we will not say more. Chapter 24-23. The ancestral shamans sent the 4 of them out of the filthy earth. This was a method that only the filthy earth cultivators could understand. Of course, all of this was no longer a secret to Lu Xiaoyi. Even if you send 1,000 miles away, you still have to part in the end. It was the same for sending the god of plagues. But old ancestor shaman did not want to leave. She was clingy and dawdling all the way. Qing Xian and the other 2 felt that they had nothing to say. They really had nothing to say. Old ancestor shaman still respectfully followed by the side, looking like she was ready to teach at any time. Qing Xian could not stand his clinginess anymore and opened his mouth. All right, seeing how sincere you are, I will talk to the superintendent and see if he can say a few more words to you. The old ancestor of sorcerer had been waiting for this sentence because he knew who was the real backbone of this group of people, not only now, but also in the future. When he arrived in front of Lu Xiaoyi, he was still as cold as ever. Ever since they entered the shaman lands, he had not interacted with them at all. However, this time, he finally glanced at the grand shaman. You want to see me because you want to hear some honest words. But what I want to tell you is that before and after the change of era, there will be no honest words. If there is, then it must be a lie. Before the new era, the universe will undergo countless changes. From the heaven's choice continent to the various celestial phenomena, there is a commonality, especially when it involves various special space boundaries. You must pay attention to the changes in the universe. When the epoch changed, some incomparably firm foundations might not be able to continue existing. If even Hong Mao's reverse space and the heaven's choice continent with over 100 billion people could change, then what else couldn't change? You have always thought that I am unwilling to contact you because of some personal grudge. Please forgive me for being blunt. We are not equal. There is no foundation of karma between you and me. We are not on the same level. The reason why I don't say anything is that there is nothing to say. Qin Xian has already told you everything. If you must listen to something, then I will tell you. Nothing can guarantee that you will continue to be free and unfettered outside the main world in the new era. Not even the purple chi. The four of them swaggered off, leaving behind the old ancestor and a few old companions looking at each other. They knew that it was time for the ancient dirt earth to make a decision. One of the ancestral shamans said, "Actually, we don't have to look at other things. We only need to look at the future. After the immortal court changes, how many positions will there be for the ancient bloodline?" Actually, even though no one said it out loud, they all understood. The immortal court declined and changed its tune. Some people who came down couldn't go back up. No matter how many of them came down, they would still go up. Some even went up in greater numbers. Ancient blood was the former, and Taoism was the latter. Now, we're still clinging to the ancient blood that's about to sink. What will happen to our primordial filth, Earth, after the new era? Another ancestral magus sighed as well. Back then, we reached a tacit understanding with immortal ancient blood because we didn't consider it thoroughly. We only cared about the future. As long as there are upper immortals among our earth cultivators, we would have the capital to survive in the cultivation world. Now, it seems that we were thinking too much. Let's not talk about whether the sorcerer orthodoxy of the earth elemental sorcerer tribe can produce a few more immortals. Even their current living conditions may not be guaranteed. This is the real world of cultivation. The old ancestor which sighed, "To forge iron, one must be strong." Only the immortals from one's own family will truly take care of one's own family. Other people's immortals are still other people's. Just from a performance of those ancient blood ancestral magus this time, we know that after the real fusion, we can't suppress them at all mentally. That's why they didn't consider our feelings at all when they acted. An ancestral magus understood tacitly. That's right. The original agreement was that the spiritual fusion would be shared equally. Now, it seems that the ancient blood didn't abide by such a rule. At the critical moment, they took the lead and didn't care about our feelings. Since that's the case, they broke the agreement first. It's not too much for us to counteract, right? Several ancestral magus nodded in agreement. They finally found a suitable reason for themselves to break the agreement. The old ancestor which said hatefully, "Alas, it's a pity for my good brothers. I thought it was a path to heaven, but it turned out to be a dead end leading to the gates of hell." An ancestral magus sneered, "I didn't agree to such an agreement from the beginning. But now, I still want to say that it's not that I'm heartless. If these 9 brothers were still alive, sooner or later, the Earth Elemental Sorcerer tribe would be divided into 2 factions. At that time, it would be too late for regrets. Now that they're dead, it's a good thing. The key point is that we don't treat them as ancestral magus brothers, but as ancient blood immortal seeds. With their final performance in front of the prayer wheel, they didn't put in any effort. Where's the trace of ancestral magus spirit? A few of the oldest ancestral magus finally reached an agreement. This was not difficult for them. The difficult part was there's no dispute about giving up the alliance with the ancient blood. The 14 ancient blood immortals, 9 of them were gone. What hope is there? The decline of the new era is set. If we continue to ally with them, there will only be trouble and no help. Our real trouble is, will the sorcerer tribe leave or not? What did Escort Lu find in the prayer wheel? An ancestral magus disagreed. Pinning our hopes on others telling us the truth is an irresponsible way of thinking. So what if they tell you the truth? Will you still think about whether or not they lied to you? Did they tell you the whole truth? Will they tell you selectively in order to achieve some goal? Suspicion will always linger. So whether Escort Lu tells you or not, it doesn't make a difference. The key point is, do you believe him? Looking back at his past in the universe's cultivation world, everyone has their own independent judgment. If you don't believe him, then what better way do we have to get out of this predicament? If you believe him, then what difference does it make whether he tells you or not? Let's just follow the path he's taken. During the debate, the ancestral magus gathered in the earth. After everything was made clear, they came to a crucial crossroad. The old ancestral magus said sternly, "All the ancestral magus of the earth are here. We will decide the future of the earth. One wrong step, and we will lose our future. If we are right, we will have unlimited light. This time, I will not make the decision alone. I will give the power to everyone. Because the earth is everyone's, not mine alone. One vote per person. The choice is to believe him or not." 36 ancestral magi were solemn, and each of them cast their solemn votes. The result was very simple. The 36 votes were unanimous. Believe. In the earth, the ancient tradition was to believe in the strong. After killing them 1,000 times, they had long been traumatized. Most importantly, Escort Lu's past experience did not seem to be too unbearable, other than the bloodshed. If you don't want bloodshed, you can stand with him. One of the youngest ancestral sorcerers said softly, Actually, we can also say that. We can release the news to the public that Escort Lu has been recognized by the purple chi of the earth. So he's the inheritance of the purple chi and the owner of the prayer wheel. Of course, that is the caller of the earth. Then, since everyone is a family, is there any problem? The ancestral magus looked at him in surprise. They did not expect such shameless words to come from the mouth of an independent ancestral magus. The old ancestral magus sighed, "Talent." Chapter 24:24. The group of 5 rings ran through the void and began their habitual judging mode. Smokey was the first to speak. "Little E, your message said that you want to save the world. Then, where did you go to save it? Tell us." Lu Xiaoyi smiled and said, "Let me tell you about an interesting place. I guarantee that none of you have been there before. The 3 listener days." Even Qing Xian forgot about the criticism he had prepared. He had to admit that there seemed to be no place in the universe that this thing had not been to before. He could find any nook and cranny, but for what reason? The netherworld was really something new. They were not unfamiliar with it, but their knowledge came from a mortal world. They did not expect that something from a mortal world would be materialized by the immortal court and run for tens of thousands of years. Before the new era, it might even be incorporated into the great Tao system. Smokey was the one who felt it the most. She knew very well that no matter how miraculous and comprehensive her new reincarnation was, she had missed out on many important things. Most importantly, there was no way to make up for these things. She wanted to help Lu Xiaoyi share some of the pressure, but now it seemed that she was powerless. The innate great Tao was still too high and mighty for her. Although she was very talented and favored by the heavenly Tao, it depended on who she was compared to. She could not be compared to a monster like Lu Xiaoyi. There were also those innate immortal seeds that sneaked into the lower realm. Unless some innate great Tao immortal seed took a fancy to her. But she did not want to. She was Boolean, Xuanyuan's Boolean, not some reserved seed of an innate great Tao. Between the innate great Tao and Xianyuan, she chose Xianyuan without hesitation, because there were too many memories of her here that she could never forget. She looked at Lu Xiaoyi and smiled. "Little E, when I return to Yellow Dragon next time, I will establish a new great Tao for myself." Lu Xiaoyi looked at her with gratification. Senior Marshal's sister finally walked out of her maze and was no longer obsessed with snatching the new reincarnation from him. Although she relied on her reincarnation talent to return to Xianyuan after many reincarnations, talent was not everything. Not only did the new samsara need creative thinking, it also needed careful thinking. In terms of innovation, she was far from Lu Xiaoyi's subversive ability. In terms of comprehensive and thorough system construction, that was her shortcoming. "Senior sister, what is it? Can you reveal it in advance?" Yin Sheng had already erected 2 monuments in the land of the Yellow Dragon, reincarnation and karma. Lu Xiaoyi thought that if she did not insist on a new reincarnation, she would definitely return to karma. But now that she said this, it was obvious that she had her own plans. Dafa, he did not hide anything. Qing Chun. Lu Xiaoyi's heart skipped a beat. He vaguely knew who the founder of the Path of Youth was. Li Wuya's wife. She was also Bu Lian's disciple. This woman was called Enran. This was obviously not a simple matter, because Enran did not die a normal death, but was sent to another space-time. The twists and turns in this matter were simply too mind-boggling. Even he had no clue at all. But obviously, Yin Cheng's choice had a deeper meaning. All these years, as his realm grew higher and higher, he understood Li Wuya more and more. He suddenly realized that he had missed out on a very important factor, which was that Li Wuya was actually a very emotional person. Then, what exactly was hidden in this? Sure enough, there were no simple people in this cultivation world. Even the usually carefree and unsophisticated senior sister Bolien had her own secrets hidden in the depths of her heart. But now, he would not get to the bottom of it. He only needed to quietly watch and silently help. He would try his best to use his own strength to clear all the obstacles in front of senior sister. No matter who dared to obstruct her, he would let them know that when a troublemaker was anxious, he would reach into your intestines and stir it up. Qing Xian nodded approvingly. Senior sister, setting the direction after the change of era, is not only wisdom, but also courage. Among the four of us, senior sister is the most responsible. There were no friends on the path of Tao. This saying was very reasonable. Just like the four of them, there was no competition between them. Although each of them specialized in different Taos, they were all cultivators from the same realm. In the competition for innate Taos during the change of era, it was very difficult for several strong competitors to succeed at the same time. This was also one of the aspects of the balance of the heavenly Tao. Yin Cheng's withdrawal was a good thing for everyone. It was really surprising that Yin Cheng, who was always competitive, would withdraw like this. He thought that Shi would be the first to withdraw. Qing Xian knew a lot about these few friends of hers. To be honest, he knew that Shi and Yin Cheng could not compete with him, but he could not say this out loud. He could not sacrifice himself, nor was he willing to let his friends hit a wall. He had always hoped that they would react on their own. Among the three of them, he did not care about Lu Xiaoyi. That guy was not human. He had a vague feeling that the innate Tao of golden immortals was not this guy's goal. So he was not within the normal range. He must fight for the innate Tao, not the heavenly tribulation, but yin and yang. As an orthodox Taoist disciple, he had his own unique feeling about Tao. He had been wavering, like a shark confirming its target, from yin and yang to heaven's tribulation, and then from heaven's tribulation back to yin and yang. Without Lu Xiaoyi's advice, he had already discovered his congenital deficiency in heaven's tribulation. It was not a problem of the system, but a problem of the momentum that dared to pull down the heavenly Tao. Heaven's tribulation was used to strike immortals. It was not used to chop firewood. To establish this Tao, one must have the heart to cause chaos in the immortal court. One must have the courage of an ambitious and ruthless person. Without these, if one went to build heaven's tribulation, there would be no other result other than failure. He was very clear about his habits and character. If Lu Xiaoyi went up, he could perfectly plan from behind, but he could not do it himself. Not tough enough. Not bold enough. Not crazy enough. There was only one real lunatic among the four of them. It was very difficult for Shi to snatch the innate Tao with his life Tao. But if he set his sights on the Houtian Tao, there was a great chance. This supreme brother also had such a goal in mind when he established Tao. Snatch the innate Tao first. If the innate Tao failed, he would snatch the postnatal Tao after the change of era. Thorough consideration and watertight. This was the consistent characteristic of the supreme Taoism. However, with Yin Cheng's change, the relative position of the Five Rings group of four dispersed. Lu Xiaoyi went to poke the heavens himself. Qing Xian focused on the old innate Tao of yin and yang, ignoring the three clear alliances request. Shishi created a new life of Tao. His first goal was innate Tao, and his second goal was postnatal Tao. Yin Cheng worked on his postnatal Tao of youth steadily. He was only here to cover for Lu Xiaoyi. Under such a distribution, the four of them had completely different goals, and there was no so-called conflict in the same realm. Establishing Tao began a walk on the right path. Chapter 24-25. The four of them returned to the Heaven's Choice Continent. They needed to come up with an overall plan for the Heaven's Choice Continent. Otherwise, it would be too troublesome to go in and out of the land of the Yellow Dragon. Lu Xiaoyi was fine. He only needed to travel for 10 years, but they had to waste 20 years. Time was tight, so they didn't have time to waste on traveling. This fellow Taoist is fellow Taoist Sin. He's been up there for 1,000,000 years, an immortal just to make up the numbers. Later on, the Immortal Court streamlined the team and removed him. I'll introduce him to everyone. In the future, if anyone is tired of living, you can find him to go to the netherworld through the back door. It won't be a problem for him to become a ghost officer. I don't dare to say that he's the king of hell, but he'll definitely be Oxhead and Horseface. Taoist Sin was speechless as he met them one by one. He sighed in his heart. With just one trip, the ancient blood ancestral shamans were completely wiped out. There were originally a dozen small groups, but now 9 of them were gone. Why bother? Wouldn't it be better to just do your own little tricks? Why did you have to provoke this madman? When Lu Xiaoyi used this tone to introduce him to his friends, he was treating him as one of his own. To be one of Escort Lu's own people, one had to have a big heart and not be afraid of trouble. One could encounter danger at any time, and one had to have a leader who didn't usually follow orders, but the benefits were also obvious. Always at the forefront of the era, there were many opportunities to climb up. One wasn't afraid of having too many ideas, but rather not daring to think. To Taoist Sin, the 1,000,000 years of immortal experience was nothing to write home about. His real cultivation career seemed to have only truly started when he was banished to the lower realm, and the most exciting part was when he met this madman. As someone who had experienced it, he was very clear what he needed to do to integrate into this group. He needed to have a proof of allegiance. It wasn't as simple as killing people, but something that could make a breakthrough in the current major event. There was only one major event now, and that was the separation of the Heaven's Choice Continent. Taoists greeted everyone one by one without putting on any airs. Since everyone was making waves in the changing of the era, they were all on the same starting line. There was no such thing as first come, first served. I discovered something. Taoists smiled. There are 2 places in this universe where Tao tablets can be set up. Previously, it was here in the Heaven's Choice Continent, and now in the land of the Yellow Dragon. It seems to be a change between the old and new powers, but is there any relation between the two? His first sentence caught everyone's attention. If the same Tao tablet is set up in the Yellow Dragon Land and the Heaven's Choice Continent at the same time, then the teleportation between these 2 places can be realized. I've tested it before. When the Tao Qi crown exceeds 10,000 feet, the person who established the Tao will be able to travel freely between 2 places. As the Tao Qi crown gets higher and higher, the number of people that can be brought over will also increase. Unfortunately, my Tao Aura crown in the land of Yellow Dragon is only 500,000 feet tall, and I can only bring less than 10 people here. As for those over 100,000 feet tall, it is hard to say how many people I can bring. Lu Xiaoyi laughed out loud. Oldson, you can do it. Even a rotten ship would have 3 caddies of nails. With this method, he would be able to solve the problem of running around. In the future, when we gather people to work in the Heaven's Choice Continent, we won't have to run around for 1 or 2 decades. This was a very practical discovery that would provide a reliable and feasible guarantee for the future gathering of large numbers of people in Heaven's Choice. He looked at everyone and said, "All of you should get to know each other better. Qing Xian Shishi will set up a monument here to solve the problem of the passageway. Senior sister, let's go to the Sword Dao Steel." Qing Xian pulled him back. "Why? Your Sword Dao Steel is already 10,000 feet tall, right? Let's see if we can bring everyone back or not." Then everyone can come here to set up their own Tao steel. The initial plan for the Heaven's Choice continent has already been set. We will meet up with fellow Taoists and later. When we return to the land of Yellow Dragon, we will prepare to pull people over. At the very least, we can pull over those close to us, including our own people in the Fifth Ring, including Zhou Xian and the other Eastern Sky realms, including the Inner and Outer Scenic Skies. We still have to control the scale. If we spread the news a little, I'm afraid there will be at least a few hundred people. Shitty Lu, listen to me carefully. During this period of time, you're not allowed to run away, and you're not allowed to go missing. The Heaven's Choice continent has just been established, and we need a banner. If you aren't here and someone else starts to show against us, that would be terrible. It's not that we have to take the credit, but for such a big matter, if we don't help each other, we will become a joke. With you here, if anyone isn't obedient, you can bite them. The group of people chatted and laughed as they hurried towards the Sword Dao steel. Taoist Sin's discovery was of great significance. It solved the problem of large-scale mobilization of cultivators. Otherwise, there would definitely be many cultivators in the land of Yellow Dragon who were hesitant between comprehending the Tao and doing good. These people couldn't be blamed for being snobbish. For half-immortals like them, the distance between the two might take 1 or 2 decades, which was still within an acceptable range. However, for most Supremes, it was a matter of flying for a lifetime. Splitting up the Heaven's Choice continent was destined to become the largest-scale human wave tactic in the history of the universe's cultivation. Unknowingly, Lu Xiaoyi had been creating history. This was also the reason why the people around him were willing to follow him with all their hearts. Who didn't want to leave their name in history and become an eternal existence? Seeing that he couldn't escape and was being closely watched by Qing Xian and Shi, Lu Xiaoyi sighed. In any case, he should at least put in some effort, right? He couldn't just throw everything to these pitiful fellows. In terms of technology, he couldn't compare to these magical cultivators who had countless tricks up their sleeves. So, he could only come up with some rotten ideas on human affairs. In this case, we need to set up a Heaven's Choice Division Coordination Committee. A few of us will all take a position in it. We're all committee members, so there's no hierarchy. If there's something to discuss, we can discuss it. If it's a big matter, it's fine as long as a majority of the committee members agree. There's no need for all of them to be present. There's bound to be an accident. Smokey pursed his lips. Why does it sound like this so-called coordination committee is set up for you to escape responsibility? I won't be participating. I don't have much experience in celestial body splitting, so I won't be able to help. Qing Xian stopped him. Senior sister, you can't. You must participate. Splitting up Heaven's Choice isn't just a matter of technology. It's also a matter of countless troublesome discipline. There needs to be a sufficiently tough disciplinary committee member to take charge, especially a certain person. Others can't control him. Only you, senior sister, can restrain him. Everyone agreed. Qing Xian continued. Equal power. The idea is good, but it's not suitable for the current situation. In troubled times, there should be power and decisiveness. Otherwise, there will be people who take chances. Heaven's Choice Division Coordination. This name is too long. Let's call it Heaven's Division Coordination Committee. Little E, you're the head of the committee. No one else can carry this banner. Only you can do it. No one will dare to say anything. Don't refuse. This matter is non-negotiable. Everyone agreed unanimously. They didn't give Lu Xiaoyi a chance to refute. He couldn't even open his mouth before he was lifted up. He could only struggle out a sentence. Why don't we become chairman? Being the head of the committee isn't too auspicious. Chapter 24-26. Everyone's plan had been set. The Heaven's Choice Division Preparatory Committee was officially established. Currently, there were only 5 committee members, but there would definitely be more in the future to accommodate more half-immortal cultivators. In the end, a very big alliance would be established, covering the inner and outer scenic skies, north, south, east, and west skies. Actually, this was the alliance of the forces of change. It was just that a specific matter was used to cover it up, so that it didn't seem so aggressive and murderous. On the surface, this alliance was for the hundreds of billions of people in the Heaven's Choice continent, but another layer of meaning was to unite all the forces with a will to change. It was just that it wasn't appropriate to say it out loud now. It was just a cover. Regarding this, Qing Xian already had a specific plan, but because of the ancient blood witch's appearance, they were delayed for a while. Now they could start. Suddenly, 5 half-immortals appeared on the sword Dao steel. Before the swordsman could react, they quickly crashed into the sword Dao steel. Under Lu Xiaoyi's operation, they magically disappeared from the steel and appeared in the sword Dao steel in the land of the Yellow Dragon in an instant. However, the number of people changed from 5 to 6, with the addition of Light, who was conveniently brought over by Lu Xiaoyi. Another 100 years had passed. The sword Dao steel's Dao Qi crown had grown to 200,000 feet. It was still not the strongest in the surrounding space, but it had already entered the first group. Right here, the committee started to recruit. Can't we change to another place? Lu Xiaoyi protested. Qing Xian was resolute and decisive. No, it can only be here. I'm already taking care of you by not hanging the committee sign outside the Dao steel. Other people's Dao steels have too many theoretical things, and they are all very practical Dao state demonstrations. It's very messy to do something like this. It's different here. It's purely a spiritual pillar. It's very suitable in the context of us wanting to unite all the cultivators that can be united. Moreover, since you've joined, you should at least pay respects to the president, right? Lu Xiaoyi was speechless. This is revenge. Naked revenge. Revenge for me occupying your cave in the interior sky. No one paid any attention to him. The committee's recruitment was in full swing. Let's start with the backbone. Actually, it was very simple. The 5-ring demi-immortals were the most supportive. Once they were summoned, they would immediately follow. Even an idiot would know what to do. Moreover, there were no idiots here. They definitely couldn't miss such a big event. If they missed it, it would mean that they would be left behind by others in this new era. My evil friends of the interior heaven. North Wind, Chief Fan, and so on, these were all people that couldn't be left behind. It was better to leave out a group and not leave out a single one. At this time, whoever was left out would cause a rift. Lu Yuzi, Ma Jun, and other acquaintances of the exterior. Even the bamboo hat was included. This was Lu Xiaoyi's insistence. Why him? Qing Xian stared at him. Because you didn't lift it high enough. Lu Xiaoyi smirked. Qing Xian seemed to have understood something. She had to admit that Lu Xiaoyi's outlook was far above them. The highest they saw was the golden immortal level, but Lu Xiaoyi saw even higher, even surpassing the Daluo golden immortal. The fact was that they could never turn the immortal court into a 5-ring immortal court. They couldn't think like that, or else a disaster will befall them. They had to show that they were compatible with Heiner. Moreover, this was also a strategy to divide the Heaven's Choice and form another force. Uniting all the upward forces, even if some of them might not be on the same side, under a big goal, it was the most foolish thing to do. There were also the Eastern Elephant Heaven and the other allied realms, especially the demi-immortals of the Heaven's Choice continent. They were bound to occupy a few positions in the committee because this was their realm. In the Heaven's Choice continent, no one was more convenient than the natives in terms of action. It was a mess. This was the inevitable stage of personnel allocation. They had to establish the leadership, take care of all aspects, then pull people to the Heaven's Choice continent to do an on-site survey, establish Dao tablets to achieve interconnection. There were countless trivial matters. It was still far from the actual operation, but after all, it was just the beginning. Of course, among the invited demi-immortals, there were also many who opposed the splitting of the Heaven's Choice continent. They felt that such a change should be left to the heavenly Dao to complete and let nature take its course, and not forcefully participate in it. If they didn't mix it up well, there would be a disaster. Laying out the facts and reasoning. This was the responsibility of Qing Xian and the others. It wasn't easy, but splitting the Heaven's Choice continent wasn't a simple matter. In the end, there were still some demi-immortals who refused to participate. And when the news gradually spread in the land of the Yellow Dragon, under the influence of some people with ulterior motives, they formed an alliance against the splitting of the Heaven's Choice continent, called the Heaven's Guard Association. This was an inevitable phenomenon. Long before they spread the news, they had already expected this. This was common in the cultivation world. If there was light, there would be dark, and there would never be only one voice. And in the eyes of the opponents, it was still unknown who was in the light and who was in the dark. Among them, the majority of the cultivators didn't do it for their own selfish interests, and it wasn't that shallow. It was just a different understanding of the heavenly Tao, a different view of the changes in the heaven and earth. There were those who handed nature over to nature, and there were also those who meddled with nature. Those who supported the splitting were also Lu Xiaoyi's enemies. For example, the marching monk, he came here himself, bringing along his own power and influence. Those who opposed the splitting were also Lu Xiaoyi's friends, and there were quite a few of them. Who was right and who was wrong? Who was right and who was wrong? Discussions began to flourish in the land of the Yellow Dragon, and it would continue until the final moment when the mystery would be revealed. As for how it would appear, no one knew in their heart. But what could be expected was that after the Heaven's Choice continent was successfully split, the heavenly Tao, as the highest judge, would weigh the gains and losses of this split. If the heavenly Tao believed that the splitting was correct and reduced the loss of life, then the supporters of the Heaven's Choice continent would have a qualitative improvement in their Tao tablets and Tao Qi. On the other hand, the Tao tablets of all the cultivators who split would be greatly reduced as their punishment. At the crucial moment of the establishment of the new era, such a change would almost determine the fate of one side. Splitting, there were great benefits, but there could also be great trouble. If they didn't split, then everything would be stable, and they could only wait for the heavenly Tao's judgment, hoping that others would pull them down so that they could rise up. This was a huge gamble that involved the entire universe's cultivation world. With the heavenly Tao as the banker, if Lu Xiaoyi bet on big, who would bet on small? The originally calm land of the Yellow Dragon was once again stirred up by countless storms. Everyone was sighing. He was indeed the biggest shit-stirrer in the universe's cultivation world after Li Wuya. The first time he came to the land of the Yellow Dragon, he used the Sword Tao tablet to disrupt the order of the Great Tao market. They thought that was it, but who knew that it was just a small test of his skills, just a small disturbance. And now it was the big disturbance. They would never have thought that this was just a warm-up for shit-stirrer Lu, and the real big disturbance was yet to come. With their poor imagination, they couldn't imagine it at all. The disturbance, this was just the beginning. Chapter 24-27. Regardless of the uproar in the land of the Yellow Dragon, Lu Xiaoyi continued to do his own things. He had his own rhythm and did not care about what others thought. He spent a few months to establish the Star Great Tao and the Great Tao of Equilibrium. These were the great Taos that he had always wanted. However, he also knew that these two great Taos were destined to be fated with him. Everything was like a dream. What he wished for did not always happen. When he first established his Tao, his initial idea was to establish the Star Great Tao and the Great Tao of Equilibrium. Then, he would encourage others to attempt to devour the heavenly tribulation and create a new reincarnation. At that time, to him, this was the best and safest way. He would hide behind the scenes and watch the immortal court turn upside down. This might indeed be Li Wuya's idea. However, as the universe changed and the Yellow Dragon established his Tao, events happened frequently. As he became more and more involved in the process of great Tao changes, he realized how naive his original plan was. 3 subversive great Taos. Hoping that others would help him pull chestnuts out of the fire was simply childish. Not to mention an outsider like Marching Army Monk. Even his closest friend couldn't do it. There were too many reasons why they could not do it. The key were 2 points. Did they have the determination to subvert? Did they have the ability to subvert? To others, they did not have either. To his friends, they had the determination, but they did not have the ability to do it. Because he had experienced the insight, He knew how difficult it was to devour. Trying to create something without actually experiencing it was like trying to get a fish out of a tree. It was like trying to build a car behind closed doors. Therefore, only he could devour. Because he had experienced the netherworld, he knew how huge and complicated the so-called new reincarnation was. Try to create a new reincarnation without experiencing it. Senior sister could not figure it out even if she racked her brains. Even if she entered the netherworld now, it would be useless. Because the system of the netherworld was established by Lu Xiaoyi. The heavenly Tao did not recognize others. Therefore, he had to create a new reincarnation. As for the heavenly tribulation great Tao, after the experience of devouring the two Tao of reincarnation, he also understood that his current heavenly tribulation great Tao still had flaws. It still needed some kind of actual process to verify it. Otherwise, even with Hong Mao's guidance, there was still no possibility of establishing a Tao. The creation of great Tao was far from being as simple as imagined. Its complexity was beyond imagination. There were countless prerequisites. It was not something that could be done just by thinking about it. When he understood this, he also understood his own path. The devouring and the new reincarnation were basically stable. They already had the conditions to establish their Tao. They were only waiting for the final flip of the cards. The heavenly tribulation was still lacking, but he still wasn't sure where the opportunity was. Sword Tao. This was an unintentional move, but the process was far beyond his imagination. He couldn't give up because this was the great Tao that he truly loved. If this was a perfect world of cultivation and there was no need for subversion and innovation, then he would basically choose this great Tao, right? Hopefully, it won't change again. Lu Xiaoyi sighed in his heart. The situation of cultivation was ever-changing, and people often could not keep up with its rhythm. Take the group of the 5 rings as an example. Other than Shi, who had not changed, Yin Cheng changed from reincarnation to karma, and then back to youth. Qing Xian changed from yin-yang to heaven's trial, and then back to yin-yang. All of them reflected this cruel reality. There was nothing that could not be changed. Even the epic had changed, let alone the people. But the star and balanced Tao steels still had to be erected, even if it was just for show. A cultivator came to the door. It was the bamboo hat. Lu Xiaoyi had once told Qing Xian to send an invitation to him, but this person had been cultivating in his own Tao steel and had not come to visit. Qing Xian and the others had already started to build their own Tao steels in the Heaven's Choice continent. The communication channel between the two places had already been established. There were already cultivators who were obsessed with this operation going to Heaven's Choice for preliminary exploration. The preliminary preparations had already begun, but this bamboo hat person had not shown up in all these years. Lu Xiaoyi's invitation was only once. He would not give a second chance. Here, other than his closest friends, no one had such a big face. The bamboo hat's Tao steel was Escape One. This was one of the core concepts of Taoism. Through research, Escape One could achieve the stable operation of this universe. In fact, in essence, this was Lu Xiaoyi's balance. This was also inevitable, because the bamboo hat person was the same as Lu Xiaoyi. They were both proficient in the 36 innate Taos as their foundation. What was the purpose of learning so much? Of course, it was to find the internal rules between the various innate Taos, the coexistence conditions. In the new era of the new universe's new Taos, this was especially important. It was just that Lu Xiaoyi's name was very straightforward. It was for balance. The bamboo hat person's name was very much like cultivation. It was Escape One. Their Escape One and balanced Tao steels were built one after the other. In the eyes of those who were observant, it was very thought-provoking. The Tao Qi of the two Tao steels were about the same. They had only reached a height of tens of thousands of feet not long after they were established. However, there was still a long way to go. Some things depended on the potential, not the current short or long. After watching for more than 10 years, this person had finally come. Inside the Tao steel of balance, Lu Xiaoyi sat cross-legged in the empty space, quietly looking at the visitor. The bamboo hat person was Dafa. He sat cross-legged facing him and spoke very politely. You invited me, but I was late by more than 10 years. This is truly a sin. Presumably, in your heart, I can't escape the impression of being indecisive, right? Lu Xiaoyi smiled. As long as you're here, there's no sooner or later. The bamboo hat person nodded. This is a major matter. I have no choice but to proceed cautiously. Moreover, I won't hide it from you. Those friends of mine are arguing over this issue. Even now, they still haven't come to a conclusion. Inspector C had given everyone a huge problem. I am only here to represent myself. I can't represent those friends of mine. I ask for your forgiveness. Lu Xiaoyi waved his hand. The struggle of the great Tao has nothing to do with personal friendship. It is the same for me. If the sky wants to rain, if the mother wants to marry, then let it be. It isn't because we chose different paths that we all became enemies. The bamboo hat person said with a smile. You are still the one who sees deeply. There have been many misunderstandings between you and me. I won't hide it. I was the one who started it, and I did it deliberately. You didn't retaliate, so I feel uneasy. I know that you don't need me to do anything, so I will just treat it as you. You are magnanimous. Let bygones be bygones. Lu Xiaoyi corrected him. Magnanimous? This is the first time someone has praised me like this. This could be a misunderstanding, but there hasn't been a good opportunity. In this cultivation world, some things can be slowly forgotten with time. Some things can be gradually deepened with time. Who can say for sure? The bamboo hat person's expression didn't change. I understand what you are saying. Personally, I'm trying my best to make Superintendent C slowly forget about me. But there is one point. I have never denied the struggle of the great Tao, but the bamboo hat person has a bottom line. He knows when to stop. Going too far is as bad as not going too far. In this way, you and I can work together. Chapter 24-28. The bamboo hat made some polite greetings and immediately got to the main topic. The division of the Heaven's Choice Continent is oasis, not confident. Lu Xiaoyi smiled. If I was confident, why would I look for you? You've eaten too much for me. I don't have the kindness to share such great merit with others. Whether or not I'm confident depends on how I do it. Do your best and know your destiny. That's all. The bamboo hat wasn't surprised. After interacting with him many times, he was already prepared for this person's foul mouth. If we set the price that the heavenly axiom has to pay for the post-apocalyptic decomposition of an epic as a fixed number, it could be tens of millions, or even hundreds of millions or billions. Then, how do we control whether we will exceed this threshold if we decompose it artificially? Lu Xiaoyi was very serious about the specific technical problems. I can't control it, because I don't know what's the appropriate threshold. That's for the Heaven's Choice Continent. Maybe if it's happy, it will be lenient. If it's unhappy, it will be more harsh. I also can't control the degree of disaster during the process. In such a big world, those who understand will understand, and those who don't will pretend not to understand. The only thing I can guarantee is that everyone will do their best. This is something I can't control. Speaking of which, if I can guarantee, will there still be a Heaven Protector Society? If everyone stands on my side, what's the point of this Tao struggle? There has to be a group to gamble with. The bamboo hat nodded. This was the truth. The swordsman didn't paint a picture. In fact, in these 10 years, this group of people had a very deep understanding of the Heaven's Choice Continent situation. They were all part of the half-immortal corporation. Everything had to be done according to reality and not based on imagination. They had their own methods. After many witnesses, they came to a conclusion. That was, even if it was a perfect division, the death price of the Heaven's Choice Continent wouldn't be less than 1 billion. If they considered the accidents that would inevitably occur during the division, it wouldn't be surprising to lose 10 billion. Half-immortals already had the ability to change the world. In some small realms, more than half of the mortals in the realms were injured or even killed. If this was the case, let alone being able to establish the Tao, the heavy karma would cause problems for the cultivator's life. This kind of prediction cast a huge shadow over the separation. Most of the half-immortals were rational. They wouldn't be easily confused by an illusory pie and lose their ability to judge. Most of the half-immortals who participated in the Heaven Guard assembly analyzed the situation rationally. They didn't deliberately oppose Lu Xiaoyi because they had an opinion about him. No matter who he went against, he could not go against the heavenly Tao. Therefore, he would definitely follow his own judgment. But Officer C still insisted. Can I know the reason? Based on the possibility alone, the chances of AOC winning are not high. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. This logic was actually not difficult to understand. That was why those who chose to stand on his side were mostly emotional. There were also those who blindly believed in him. The threshold was very high, or perhaps it was purely because they did not have much hope of establishing their own Tao, so they wanted to make up for it in other ways. In other words, his side was more willing to gamble. On the other hand, the Heaven Protection Society sought stability. I have never calculated my gains and losses because if I had calculated every step on my path of cultivation, I would have reincarnated countless times already. Could the heavenly Tao be calculated and guessed? Therefore, I only choose to do it or not. If I do it, there will be benefits. If I don't do it, I'll be handing the initiative to others. I choose to take the initiative. It is that simple. The bamboo hat bowed. I understand. Since that is the case, I am willing to join. Because I also want to do something. Even Officer C doesn't care. Why should I care? Lu Xiaoyi smiled. The heavenly Tao will not reject anyone. This is our philosophy. If we succeed, you don't need to thank me. If we fail, you also don't need to blame me. Everyone will do their best and fulfill their responsibilities. That is enough. Under the coordination of the committee, the preliminary exploration of the Heaven's Choice continent, the predetermined location of the convergence point, and other preparatory work were carried out in full swing. Although everyone knew that the separation of the Heaven's Choice continent would take at least hundreds or thousands of years, the preliminary work could not be slacked off. This was the only way to accurately determine the size of the Heaven's Choice continent's crust. This kind of busy work would continue for a period of time. After that, it would be time to wait. When the great Tao of space was broken and the geological structure of the Heaven's Choice continent was understood, it would be the time to begin the separation. It wouldn't be this tight all the time, but it had to be tight in the beginning. Lu Xiaoyi had no choice but to frequently travel between the Yellow Dragon continent and the Heaven's Choice continent. Not only did he help to transport some cultivators over, he was also in charge of explaining some problems in the real world. Fortunately, his reputation was loud enough, and the committee basically covered all aspects of the cultivation world. Therefore, for the time being, there weren't too many problems. Hopefully, this kind of situation would continue. Tens of years later, the busyness of the Heaven's Choice continent came to an end. The preparatory work was more or less completed. Most of the cultivators returned to the Yellow Dragon continent. Only a small number of cultivators would periodically go over to inspect the mapping points, replenish them, and maintain them. This was to ensure that even if the great Tao of space collapsed suddenly, they would be able to record as much information as possible. The great Tao tablets that were already sparse in the Heaven's Choice continent started to increase in numbers. However, it was still far from the prosperity it had at its peak. It was just a passageway-like existence that gave the cultivators of the Heaven's Choice continent a way to learn about the Tao realm. It also helped the Tao Qi of the Tao tablets. This was an unexpected surprise that didn't need to be mentioned in detail. Lu Xiaoyi no longer rushed about. Instead, he placed all his attention on his Tao tablet. The stars and equilibrium were just a cover. Therefore, he placed most of his energy on the Sword Tao tablet, including studying the use of that strand of purple gas. It was very rewarding. The trip to the ancient filthy earth was not in vain. On this day, he was meditating in his Sword Tao steel when a visitor who surprised him barged in. The visitor seemed to be very familiar with his Sword Tao spirit and clicked his tongue in amazement. Good fellow, even Liwia didn't dare to erect a Sword Tao tablet. Brat, you dare to erect one just like that? Aren't you afraid that a tall tree will attract the wind and bring disaster to yourself? Lu Xiaoyi looked at this old man. This old man's realm had increased again. Now, he was also a half-immortal like him. He really kept up with the times. Li Wei didn't erect it because there was no change in the era. If there was, I wouldn't have anything to do with it. It's just erecting a Tao. What disaster would there be? If I don't erect one now, am I supposed to regret it after the new era? The lords in the heavens have too many things to worry about. They can't even take care of themselves. I'm afraid that they won't have time to care about a small pawn like me. The universe is chaotic, and I'm just fishing in troubled waters. In the land of the yellow dragon, there are all kinds of innovations. It's not just the Sword Dao tablet. Chapter 24-29. The old man walked around with a smile and clicked his tongue. Not bad, not bad. It makes sense, but it's a little too simple. Lu Xiaoyi sneered. The true Great Tao is actually the simplest Great Tao. Unfortunately, I can't do it to the extreme. But senior strength is really like an old clam blooming. The older you are, the prettier you are. Can you tell me, how did you get here? When do you plan to become an immortal? Old Wenji did not think much of it. There's no rush. It depends on my mood. Yes, it's not my mood. It's the mood of the villainous heavens. Little E, after all these years, how have I treated you? Cultivators should not talk about this. This was a mortal's way of thinking. There is no such thing as how you treat me. I have to treat you the same way. But the old man just had to say this. Lu Xiaoyi could not do anything about it. As close as family. From the bottom of my heart. If Senior has any needs, Junior will go through fire and water. I will not be picky or shortchange. He quickly lit a cigarette for old man Wenji. There was no air here, but cultivators used manna to smoke in the air. It had a different smell. Old man Wenji nodded in satisfaction. Whether it was true or not, this little guy's mouth was very sweet and his attitude was very good. That was enough. Good. Little E, you have conscience. But looking at your 3 Dao tablets, other than the Sword Dao tablet, which is a little interesting, the other 2 seem to be lacking something. I don't know what it is that's missing. I just don't know what little E is up to. Lu Xiaoyi laughed in his heart. The old man's eyes were very sharp. He could tell at a glance that he did not have the kind of momentum to establish Dao in the balance of the stars. In the land of the yellow dragon, until now, no one had been able to see this point. Everyone said that Escort Lu was very good. He spread Dao alone, planted a lot of seeds, and had a chance to become an immortal in the future. But he was not as good as the old man who could see through him at a glance. At the beginning of the establishment of the Dao, of course, there are some things missing. I can only slowly replenish them in the future. I'm young, and my knowledge is limited. Why don't you give me a detailed look? Hearing this, the old fox knew that this little fox was playing dumb, but it didn't matter. He just had to pretend that he didn't understand. With his background, he might not be able to give any constructive suggestions to these so-called innovations of the human race. I dare not say it. I dare not say it. Did I really say that the great Tao is yours or mine? I can't tell. Young people should guard against arrogance and rashness. Now that they were not mature enough, they could slowly fill in the gaps. Come, come, come. I know that little E has been away for a long time and has not returned to the 5th Ring Road. I'm afraid that you have forgotten the taste of your hometown. I have a most delicious braised meat in Xinyuan City and also sweet potatoes. Why don't we have some? Lu Xiaoyi didn't refuse anyone. He wanted to see what the old man had up his sleeve. The 2 of them talked about this and that, but they rarely talked about cultivation, let alone the great Tao. They only talked about the group of old friends who had returned from Zhouxian to help Qin Kong. Were they reminiscing about the past? Maybe, but it was more likely that they were testing him. Obviously, the old man felt that he couldn't say what he wanted, so he wanted to lay the groundwork first. However, after drinking a few jars of wine and eating a lot of meat, the old man was still trying to change the topic. Lu Xiaoyi suddenly felt that he was too much. There were fewer and fewer old friends. Why should he make things difficult for such an old man? Although he knew that the old man's identity was not simple, he decided to take the initiative to admit defeat since he was much older than him. He took the initiative to ask. Basically, He couldn't refuse no matter what it was. Now, he really didn't want to meddle in other people's business. The committee led by Qing Xian was also watching him closely because he was a habitual offender who had escaped. To make things difficult for such an old man, it was not a small matter. He was also in the state of half immortal and didn't lack the power of groups in the Fifth Ring Road. However, he still rushed over, which explained a lot. Senior, just say what you want. There's no need to make things difficult. If I can help, I will. After all, we have known each other for a long time and have gone through thick and thin together. Wen Ji chuckled. He succeeded in pretending to be bitter, because he knew that this little guy was not a heartless person. If it was someone else who was focused on the Tao, he wouldn't have used this trick. Have you been in contact with Heaven's eyes recently? Lu Xiaoyi shook his head. Not really. It seems that they haven't given me a mission for a long time. It's not just me, but also Qing Xian and the others. It seems that Heaven's eyes has given up on some of their perseverance. However, there was an order from Heaven's eyes a few decades ago. It was not a mission, but to intervene in a dispute. It was not very fair. Senior, what do you mean? When Ji became serious, do you feel that the current Heaven's eyes is a little different from before? Lu Xiaoyi smiled wryly. Senior, why don't you just say it? Although I have a position in Heaven's eyes, I am not familiar with this organization. I am even more confused about the changes in the upper echelons of Heaven's eyes. Who cares about it now? They are too busy with their own Tao. When Ji was serious. You also know that Heaven's eyes has rarely given out missions in recent years. The reason is very simple. 2 of the 4 Heaven's eyes immortal masters have left, so the remaining 2 are too busy. Moreover, their lifespans are approaching, so Heaven's eyes is basically useless now. Lu Xiaoyi was a little surprised. I thought that the 4 of them could still hold on for a while longer. Even if they have been wasted, as you said, the remaining 2 who have intervened in the affairs of the lower realm are not idle. Which 2 left? Wen Ji was a little sad. The Great Lord and the Divine Monk. Lu Xiaoyi was stunned. This was really a little beyond his expectations. He had only interacted with a few immortal masters, but one of them had left just like that. The cruelty of the change of eras finally began to appear around him. Daoist Haiyan's face appeared in front of him. Although it was only the incarnation of the Great Lord in the mortal realm, he still felt a little incredulous. Lord Linglong left? How is that possible? Shouldn't the spiritual treasure be left for last? Wen Ji said in a lonely voice, without the spiritual treasure, it will definitely be left for last. Under the heavenly Tao, everyone is equal. No one can escape from this cycle. This includes the spiritual treasure. Because you rely on the inner and outer scenic sky projection to teleport, you rarely come into contact with the Heaven's eyes spiritual treasure. Otherwise, you would have known long ago. Lu Xiaoyi was silent for a while. What will happen to the exquisite world now that the Great Lord has left? Wen Ji smiled bitterly. It's fine for now, but no one could say for sure what will happen in the future. For the cultivators of the exquisite world, this is just another time when Lord Linglong falls into a deep sleep. However, whether or not he will wake up this time is hard to say. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. Then why are you looking for me? Wen Ji was rarely serious. It's not for the exquisite world. It's for Lord Linglong himself. I know that you don't have a deep relationship with him, but Lord Linglong was very close to Li Wuya back then. So, I'm hesitating. I wonder if I can entrust you with some things? Chapter 2430. Lu Xiaoyi didn't hesitate. Senior, please tell me. I've taken on many of Li Wuya's karma. This one won't make a difference. Although, I don't interact much with the Grand Monarch, he took care of me a lot in the Heavenly Eye, so I should do something for him. Senior, you don't have to worry. Just tell me what I can help the Grand Monarch. Wen Ji heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Although he knew it would be like this, he still didn't have much confidence when he came. The era was about to change, the universe was in chaos, and the great Tao was about to be established. There were a lot of things to do, especially for the competing half-immortals. For these Tao establishment immortals, now was the most crucial time. Time was precious, So how could they have the time to care about things unrelated to the establishment of Tao? During this period of time, all the big and small events that happened in the universe were definitely related to the establishment of Tao. This situation would become more and more intense until the new era began. Therefore, for a normal half-immortal who had established Tao, it was right to be less involved in karma and more self-cultivation. It was because of this concern that Lu Xiaoyi would be justified if he rejected him, and he couldn't force him. Therefore, there were a lot of foreshadowing. Of course, this was for normal cultivators. Lu Xiaoyi had always been abnormal, which was also where Wen Ji's hope lay. Fortunately, this guy was still a lunatic who didn't care at all. The fall of innate spiritual treasures is different from that of human immortals. Human immortals' souls and bodies are destroyed, so they can only rely on the great Tao to complete a different continuation, which is the most difficult. However, the fall of innate spiritual treasures starts from being reforged. The spiritual treasure's body is still preserved, but it's just like other spiritual treasures, facing the baptism of the era's change. Lu Xiaoyi nodded lightly. This was within his expectations. Although it seemed that the heavenly Tao was especially harsh on humans, if one considered the terrifying number of humans and the fact that innate spiritual treasures couldn't be replicated, such a difference in treatment made sense. Otherwise, if they were treated the same as humans, innate spiritual treasures would disappear sooner or later. The fall of the immortal Lord of Numinous Treasures is divided into 3 stages. First, the immortal lattice is stripped, beaten into the mortal world, and thrown into the purple thunder purgatory to be stripped layer by layer until the spiritual treasure is stripped to the state it was when it was first born. After that, he would enter the primal chaos and comprehend the will of the heavens. He would rediscover the origin of the universe and search for the meaning of the existence of connate spiritual treasures. This was searching. In the end, they will return to the origin world and work hard together with the other connate spiritual treasures to ascend to the immortal realm. Wen Ji sighed. Out of the 3 stages, the separation state is the most dangerous because you have to endure the layers of purple lightning. It's a painful process of returning to the starting point, but the time is also the shortest, about a few hundred years. It was hard to say when it came to finding a state. To find the value and significance of an innate spiritual treasure in this universe. It all depended on the spiritual treasure's own fate and original wisdom. The time it took could be long or short. It could be short or short. There's nothing much to say about the gauntlet. At that time, it will be tested by the heavenly Tao together with the other connate spiritual treasures. Those who are capable will go up, and those who are mediocre will go down. It's a process that will take time. If it's short, it'll take hundreds of thousands of years. If it's long, it'll take millions of years. When Ji looked at Lu Xiaoyi and said, outsiders can't help with finding and gathering states, and they can't help. That's the evolution process of an innate spiritual treasure. It's about being natural and letting nature take its course. No one can help because no one has such a long lifespan. What I want to say is the separation state. An innate spiritual treasure will suffer the pain of being stripped away in the purple lightning purgatory. If it's careless, it will face the risk of its Tao being destroyed. It's the first hurdle for a spiritual treasure to fall. Originally, this should be borne by the spiritual treasure itself. Back then, it had received so many favors in the immortal court. Here, it had to repay them one by one. This was also the cycle of the heavenly Tao. To most spiritual treasure immortal monarchs, although the days were difficult, they could basically grit their teeth and endure it. However, Lord Linglong was different. It had served in the heavenly eye for too long and had countless bad karma. Even if its heart was righteous, the karma and resentment of the evil that had been destroyed by its hands would be born out of thin air in the purple lightning purgatory. The heavenly Tao would give them a chance to fulfill their wishes. For ordinary spiritual treasure immortal monarchs, due to the spiritual treasure's unique way of doing things, there were very few of such karma. It was not much, and there was no need for anyone to specially protect it. However, Lord Linglong abhorred evil and was fair. In the hundreds of thousands of years of presiding over the heavenly eye, it had dealt with countless evil and evil, including countless true monarchs and half-immortals from all races. The resentment of these people naturally could not do anything to you when you are an immortal monarch. However, when you are banished and stripped away in the purple lightning purgatory, there will be a chance to settle the karma. Maybe not all of them will come, but even if a portion of them comes, it will still be a terrifying number. Wenji looked at him with hope. What I want you to do is to protect Lord Linglong and help him safely pass through the separation state. Now 100 or 200 years have passed. It might take another 100 or 200 years. I have a feeling that Linglong might not be able to endure in the purple lightning purgatory. The purple lightning purgatory is the will of the heavenly Tao. You don't have to care about it. There's only one thing you need to do. Those evil that were born on their own in the purgatory. Reduce the pressure on Linglong and allow him to pass through this stage smoothly. It can be considered as a final help from a friend like me. As for Linglong's future after this stage, it is not something we can worry about. The future is too long, and we can't even protect ourselves. Lu Xiaoyi finally understood. Was it to be a wet nurse for Lord Linglong when he was still in his infancy? 100 or 200 years. Senior, if someone helps Linglong when he is still in his separation state, will it affect him passing through this stage? This was a very important point. Everyone's goal was to help Lord Linglong survive, not to destroy his future. Therefore, they had to be clear about the extent of help and not blindly help. When Ji smiled, no matter. If a natural disaster is blocked by a spiritual treasure, it is natural for people to resist it. You just have to remember not to affect the purple lightning's stripping of the spiritual treasure. Those evil spirits exist in the depths of Lord Linglong's consciousness. Every time he kills someone, every time he gives such an order, there will be memories left in the spiritual treasure, and karma will be attached to him. As the purple lightning strips the spiritual treasure layer by layer, what it strips away is not only the spiritual treasure's ability, but also the memories left behind by karma. In a special purgatory environment, they will take the form of resentment and devour the spiritual treasure's body. This is a process of karma returning to zero. If a pre-celestial spiritual treasure wants to return to its original state, other than the spiritual treasure's body, it also has to return to zero in terms of spiritual karma. However, this karma is not for personal reasons, but for public reasons. Heaven's eye has always been fair, and Lord Linglong is known for being impartial among the 4 immortal monarchs. Therefore, his karma can also be summed up as the karma of the entire cultivation world. The receiver is him, but the karma may not be. Under such a relationship, any cultivator who indirectly benefits has the right to take action. Therefore, there is no harm in taking action against these spiritual bodies. Chapter 24:31. Lu Xiaoyi understood what had happened and knew that he had to make this trip. Lord Linglong, Yin Exine, Haiyan, they were all the same person, the numinous treasure immortal lord, who had played an important role in Xuanyuan's recent history. The sword vein would never abandon a friend who had helped it, even if it was no longer a friend. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Why did you intervene halfway? When Ji sighed, Linglong knew about his fate and told me about it, but he didn't want anyone to help him. Well, he was afraid that I would find a hired thug for him. This was his will, and he couldn't go against it. So when he first fell, I didn't mention it to anyone. Also, you humans were in the midst of establishing your Tao. I delayed you for hundreds of years just for a friendship, something without any practical value. I understand the importance of this. But after nearly 200 years, I felt more and more uneasy. I kept feeling that something bad was going to happen. In my hesitation, I finally came to find you. I hope it's not too late. Lu Xiaoyi didn't say anything. Then, Lord Linglong's future, even if he successfully passes the state of alienation, will be another matter. When Ji nodded, numinous treasures won't participate in the division of Tao in the new era. This is for sure. This is the position that connate numinous treasures have for themselves. Therefore, the change of eras may be important to humans, but to the numinous treasures, it's just a big hurdle. There will be numinous treasure immortal lords who will fall, but there will be numinous treasures who will rise in the future. But the window of time is not before or after the change of eras. In view of the longevity of numinous treasures, it's more important after the new era. Being an immortal lord won't give Ling Long any advantage. Not only him, but all numinous treasure immortal lords are the same. They will fight for the immortal position after the new era with all the numinous treasures. There will be no special treatment. It will be a fair competition, just like when the universe was first created. Of course, there were differences between connate numinous treasures. That was the difference in their intrinsic qualities. On this point, if everyone were to return to the starting point, the former numinous treasure immortal lord would have a greater chance of becoming an immortal due to his greater potential. However, if you want to see these things, it is impossible before the epoch. You can only see them after the epoch, tens or hundreds of thousands of years, or even longer. That's why I'm hesitating. It's because such a long period of time, a completely unpredictable future, would delay your most precious time to establish your Tao. It's all because of our past friendship. Theoretically, it's not worth it. Emotionally, everyone has their own choices. Lu Xiaoyi was a meticulous person. What kind of place is the Purple Thunder Purgatory that Senior speaks of? This junior is ignorant and inexperienced and has never heard of it. In the Purple Lightning Purgatory, I believe that Lord Ling Long is not the only fallen immortal lord. If I were to enter, is there anything I need to take note of? When Ji smiled and said, I've never been to that place either. It's the purgatory of innate spiritual treasures. No matter what realm a spiritual treasure is in, even if it doesn't die, it'll still lose 10 layers of skin. This was the forbidden ground of the numinous treasure race. Only when an innate spiritual treasure ascends to the immortal realm and is once again banished, would the spiritual treasure have the chance to go in and suffer. This is the spiritual treasure's alternative reincarnation. Of course, to humans, it's not that dangerous. I've heard people say that in the history of cultivation, there have been human cultivators who have gone in before. Different races have different feelings there. To spiritual treasures, it's a forbidden ground to be skinned, but to humans, that might not be the case. Speaking of the reincarnation of innate spiritual treasures, Lu Xiaoyi roughly understood. Just like how humans had the netherworld for mortals, cultivators had the reincarnation system of the cultivation world. All living things in the universe should have such a place as the beginning and end of life to complete the cycle of life. But now, it seemed that the reincarnation of innate spiritual treasures and the reincarnation of human beings were not the same thing. It leaned more towards the nature of a universe, and not the kind of things that humans set for themselves. He could go and take a look. Who knew? It might be beneficial to his new reincarnation. Lu Xiaoyi stood up. Since he had decided, his character was not to hesitate anymore. I'll move out immediately. I'll do my best to help the Grand Monarch pass through the state of separation safely. Please believe that Xin Yuan, like you, values the safety of the Grand Monarch. When Ji smiled and nodded, he was comforted. Although everything was within his expectations, Lu Xiaoyi did not shirk his responsibility. He was touched by Lu Xiaoyi's prompt decision. No matter what, this human orthodoxy that his old friend had made was really trustworthy. Lu Xiaoyi left a line of words on the Sword Dao tablet. I'm going to save the common people. Looking at the somewhat puzzled eyes of the old man, he smiled and explained, I still have a bunch of friends who always blame me for leaving without saying goodbye, so I'm leaving a message. When Ji was not deaf nor blind, of course, he knew what these young humans were up to. Even with his status, he could not help but sigh at the audacity of these humans. The association is big, with thousands of cultivators. Of course, the president can't leave without permission. Speaking of which, this is all my fault. Since Xiaoyi is going, then I'll stay here and mix with Qing Xian and the others, see if I can come up with any bad ideas. Liu Xiaoyi was secretly happy. This was the result he wanted. In fact, at this stage, he really did not need to do anything as the president. The old man had lived in the Fifth Ring for a long time and also participated in the Fifth Ring War twice. In fact, he was very familiar with Qin Xian, Yin Ling, and Shi Shi. The point was that this old man's bad ideas might be more useful than thousands of half-immortals combined. The two of them left the tablet and said their goodbyes. Before leaving, Liu Xiaoyi suddenly turned back. "Senior, when did you need me to take care of the state of separation? Between you and me, there's no need to be so polite. It's my duty." Wen Ji sighed in his heart. He already knew that his identity could not be hidden from this cunning and shrewd guy, but they were separated by a layer of window paper, and no one was willing to break through it. "Me? Haha. A lonely soul like me will not be taken in for the time being. Even if that day comes, Xiaoyi, you don't have to worry about it. I don't have as many karma entangling me as Ling Long. I can solve it." Liu Xiaoyi did not insist. He had to understand the old man's pride. For most of the immortals of Lingbao, they did not need to care too much about the state of separation, because they had a peaceful and righteous attitude towards cultivation. Ling Long was an exception. The main reason was because of his position as the manager of the Heavenly Eyes. Seeing that there seemed to be people looking at him, he knew that this was not good. Afraid that Qin Xian had set up a secret stake to prevent him from escaping, he hurriedly pulled himself up and disappeared instantly. When Qin Xian and the others rushed over angrily, there was only a smiling old face left. "Little friend Qin Xian, little Yinling, little Shi Shi, how have you been?" Chapter 2432. Liu Xiaoyi landed in a void. Actually, he didn't know where he was. However, there were too many dangerous places in the universe that he didn't know about. He had been to many places that were related to humans, and some that were related to demonic beasts. However, he didn't know much about the places related to spiritual treasures. The Purple Thunder Purgatory was a forbidden place for innate spiritual treasures. It wasn't a place that humans could control. Among the cultivators of the main world, no one could find this place without the guidance of a half-immortal innate spiritual treasure. With the innate spiritual treasure's nature, how could it lead human cultivators here for no reason? 200 years? Hopefully, Qin Xian wouldn't tie him up when he returned this time. This is the dense lightning pool. In the universe, the most famous lightning source in the Toulon galaxy. A group of more than 10 Yuanying, led by a perfected cultivator, slowly approached the most famous celestial scene in the galaxy. The Toulon galaxy, a galaxy at the edge of the heavens, was like the spoke of a wheel, the place closest to the wheel. It was located in the northern sky, the periphery of the infinite three-dimensional wheel of the universe. It was easy to imagine the distance from the axis, which was the immortal court and the land of the Yellow Dragon. In such a galaxy, going to the land of the Yellow Dragon was an extravagant hope. If it was a half-immortal, they could still go through the inner and outer sceneries. However, for a perfected cultivator or Yuanying, this distance was an insurmountable moat. It was too far. Even if they flew for tens of thousands of years, they still wouldn't be able to reach it. The form of cultivation in the entire universe diverged from the center. The closer it was to the axis, the more developed the cultivation civilization and the more cultivation domains there were. The further it was from the axis, the more sparse it was. The sparser it was, the harder it was to communicate. Without communication, it was hard to improve. This was an endless cycle. The end result was that the cultivation civilization and the mainstream of the inner circle were worlds apart. They could only rely on their own research and exploration. Occasionally, there would be mainstream cultivators from the inner circle who would come to preach Tao. However, it was unknown how many years it would take to see one. Purely based on luck, they could barely follow behind the mainstream cultivation world and maintain the existence of the cultivation world. The distribution of spiritium at the universe level seemed messy and without any pattern, but that might be because the area you paid attention to was too small. If you looked at hundreds of universes at once, you would find that there was a pattern to the distribution of spiritium in the universe. The most basic rule was that the closer one was to the land of the yellow dragon of the Axis immortal court, the more likely one would find an astral body with spiritual vigor, and the stronger the spiritual vigor would be. On the contrary, the astral body would be sparse, and the strength of the spiritual vigor would be average. The cultivation world made a distinction between such situations. In the cultivation world, those that could still be considered prosperous and could keep up with the development of the mainstream world were called the inner circle. Outside the inner circle was, of course, the outer circle, which was the place that was far away from the mainstream. Once out of the boundary, one's eyes would be boundless, and one could fly for hundreds of years without seeing another cultivation planet. In such an outer circle civilization, cultivation was no longer the mainstream. On the contrary, mortal civilization was slowly beginning to rise. This was the overall structure of the universe. The Toulon star system was such a cultivation realm in the outer circle. It grew up alone in the universe, and there were no other cultivation realms around it for nearly 1,000 years. Sometimes, it gave them a strange feeling as if they were the only cultivation civilization in the universe. But they knew that this was not the case. There were no immortals here. A few thousand years ago, a half-immortal appeared out of pity, but he was killed in the storm of the exterior realm. The seedlings that had just been raised were extinguished, and they returned to the ignorant state of cultivation in the past. They had speculations about the change of eras, but they were hazy, vague, and specious. In fact, to them, it made no difference whether they knew or not. Even if they knew, they could not participate in it, and they were not even qualified to be a spectator. If they did not know, they could have peace and quiet, and it was quite good. In the Toulon star system, there was a strange celestial phenomenon. They called it the high-density thunder pool because there were thunder and lightning here all year round. It had been like this since the beginning of the cultivation history of Toulon. They believed that this was a first-rate wonder in the universe. However, if it was placed on the level of the universe, this so-called wonder was nothing. After that senior half-immortal had traveled around the inner circle of cultivators, he had come back with a sigh and told the cultivators in his hometown that such wonders could be found everywhere in the inner circle. Even if it was compared to the same lightning phenomenon, it would not be ranked in the top 10,000. It was the pride of the Toulon star system. As long as the people of Toulon thought it was beautiful, it was enough. The high-density thunder pool was a place that the cultivators of the Toulon star system had to visit after they reached the nascent soul realm. It was like a pilgrimage. No matter whether you cultivated thunder or not, you could not miss this place. It was full of ritual. It cannot be helped. There was no other place as magical as this near the Toulon star system. Dozens of people looked at the high-density thunder pool from afar, quietly admiring this miracle of nature. This was a group of meteorites formed by hundreds of small meteorites, revolving around a planet. Because of the repulsion of the planet's magnetic poles, intermittent white thunder and lightning formed between the meteorites. Because there were many meteorites, when hundreds of meteorites reacted with the planet at the same time and triggered thunder and lightning, a place similar to a thunder pool was formed in the sky. The local cultivators called it the high-density thunder pool. Judging from the energy reaction of the white thunder and lightning, it did not seem to be very powerful. Don't underestimate these white thunder and lightning. They look thin and have limited power, but if you really get hit by one, your future cultivation will be over. A perfected cultivator explained to the Yuanying juniors in detail, thunder is divided into 7 colors, and each color is different. White thunder and lightning like this should be the lowest level of natural thunder and lightning, but you can't underestimate it. Most of you cultivate thunder and lightning techniques. Just by looking at it from afar, you can understand a lot of Tao principles. He shook his head and sighed. Unfortunately, the great Tao of thunder has collapsed. The thunder pool's thunder array is no longer as regular as before. I don't know if this is a good or bad thing for us. Everyone was a little dispirited. Because the high-density thunder pool was close at hand, These cultivators of Toulon star system had chosen to cultivate thunder and lightning. Now that the great Tao of thunder had collapsed, who knew what the future would be like? How many of them would be able to see the day when the great Tao of thunder was re-established? The perfected cultivator turned his back to the thunder pool and faced the Yuanning juniors. The core of the thunder pool is that planet, and its surface is covered with a layer of thunder. Some people say that it's not a planet at all, but a huge ball of thunder. However, it's hard for us to prove it, because no one can enter the depths of the thunder pool. Even I can only wander around the periphery of the thunder pool for a while. If I go any deeper, my foundation will be damaged. He was talking nonstop when one of his sharp-eyed disciples suddenly shouted, "Senior uncle, it seems like a figure has rushed into the thunder pool." Chapter 24:33. The perfected cultivator didn't think much of it. These Yuanning cultivators had just arrived in the universe, so they were always making a fuss about nothing. Unlike other celestial phenomena, the dense thunder pool couldn't be broken into by force. The lightning was so fast that it was impossible for humans to avoid it. Anyone who entered would be struck by lightning. Even pig iron would be struck in a liquid iron. However, it was obvious that not only one Yuanning cultivator saw this, but almost all of them. The perfected cultivator turned his head, and a figure flashed across his eyes. It was indeed a human cultivator who had completely entered the dense thunder pool and was flying toward the depths. The characteristic of a high-density lightning pool was that no matter what intruded into it, it would be struck into a ball of lightning, including humans. During the long period of astronomical changes, a planet and hundreds of meteorites had long reached a perfect balance. However, the intrusion of an external object would destroy this balance. In order to restore the balance, all the lightning would be concentrated on the intruder. This was why he warned these Yuanning cultivators not to intrude on their own, just because the white lightning was not powerful enough. After entering, it wouldn't just be one lightning strike, but countless lightning strikes. Before the figure was completely covered by the lightning, he could still vaguely see the side of his face. It was so familiar. He couldn't help but be stunned, and his heart was in turmoil. The Yuanning cultivators next to him didn't notice anything unusual and were still chattering endlessly. The martial uncle, who had a poor sense of direction, was the most powerful cultivator in the Toulon galaxy and was also the most respected cultivator. He was also one of the few supreme yang spirit cultivators in the Toulon galaxy. The most important thing was that he wasn't a native of Toulon. He was a rare cultivator who came here for some unknown reason, but he found that he couldn't go home no matter what. Therefore, he stayed on Toulon, and while teaching, he was also looking for a way to go home. It seemed that there was nothing he didn't know. In the thousands of years since the martial uncle came to Toulon, he had brought the cultivation system of Toulon to a new level. He was simply a role model for cultivators. Martial uncle, will that person be struck to death? Did he enter the thunder pool on purpose? Or was he helpless? Or was he crazy? Their martial uncle, who had a poor sense of direction, did not answer. Only then did the Yuanning disciples realize that their martial uncle had tears in his eyes. No one dared to say a word. They were so cautious that they didn't know what had happened. However, he quickly came to his senses. He was very ashamed that Supreme Yang Spirit had lost his composure in front of these younger disciples. No, this little bit of lightning can't kill him. He must have gone in on purpose. You're right about one thing. He's a madman. The Yuanning were very curious and felt that their martial uncle's words were a little contradictory. However, it was not good for them to ask too much, and it was very uncomfortable to hold it in. The person with a poor sense of direction knew what they were thinking and explained. The one who went in is a half-immortal, the strongest half-immortal in the universe's cultivation world. This kind of lightning couldn't kill him. As for why he went in, I don't know. However, this person has always been crazy. Maybe he's itching for a beating? He finally met an old friend. Even if he missed the opportunity, his mood began to brighten up. How many years had it been? He didn't even dare to count. When the nascent soul cultivators saw the smile on their uncle master's face, they felt relieved. They respected this Uncle Master very much. Although he was called Uncle Master, he was actually their master. Their achievements today were all cultivated by him. Seeing that the human-shaped lightning ball was going deeper and deeper without any intention of stopping, it seemed that this kind of dangerous situation was nothing to a powerful half-immortal. One of the Yuan could not help but ask, "Martial Uncle, is this lightning pool nothing to all half-immortals?" The person with a poor sense of direction shook his head and laughed. "Of course not. For most half-immortals, this is still a dangerous place. For example, old ancestor Shankai. Have you ever heard of him really going into the depths of the lightning pool?" Shankai was the half-immortal from Earth Planet who had passed away. He was also the only half-immortal in the history of Earth Planet's cultivation world. "Martial Uncle, you said that this half-immortal is very powerful. Then, how powerful is he?" The person with a poor sense of direction smiled and thought for a while. "He is probably invincible among the half-immortals. Earth Planet is too remote and cannot hear news from the outside world. Therefore, you know nothing about the outside world. What I know is only 1,000 or 2,000 years old news. It is too outdated. However, if you meet him in the future, you can call him Shitstick Lou. It is his favorite nickname." The Yuan laughed. Someone asked, "Martial Uncle, do you mean that this half-immortal expert especially likes to stir up shit? I wonder if he will come to Earth Planet to stir up trouble?" The person with a poor sense of direction laughed. "Earth Planet? He stirred up this kind of realm when he was Yuan-ing. When he was a true monarch, he stirred up a top-grade realm. Tens of thousands of Yuan-ing, thousands of true monarchs, and a few half-immortals. Now, he should be preparing to stir up the immortal court. The Earth Planet is too small for him. I am afraid that he will not be interested." The Yuan were speechless. However, their martial uncle had never lied to them. Therefore, they believed every word he said. That was because their martial uncle came from a top-grade realm in the inner circle. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to be omniscient. Every orthodoxy in the Earth Planet respected him as their master. That was because he could guide the cultivation of almost every orthodoxy. He was also knowledgeable and knowledgeable. Then will he talk to us? For such an expert, we are like ants, right? Just like how a mortal would pay attention to ants on the side of the road when they walk past a field. The person with a poor sense of direction smiled and reminisced. Yes, he definitely will, because he often calls himself an ant, but he does not have a high and mighty personality. "Martial Uncle, will this expert come out soon after entering the lightning pool? Will we have a chance to meet him if we wait here?" The person with a poor sense of direction smiled bitterly. "I don't know about that. Unfortunately, my back was facing the dense lightning pool just now. My divine sense was greatly affected by the lightning pool, so I did not discover him immediately. With his crazy personality, it is impossible to predict. Maybe he will come out soon, or maybe we will have to wait for a few hundred years. Who knows?" A courageous cultivator finally asked the question that everyone wanted to ask. "Martial Uncle, you must be old friends with this Shitstick Lou, right? Since he came here, he must have a way to go back. Does that mean that you can finally go home?" The person with a poor sense of direction was in a daze. The memories of the past came flooding back like a tidal wave. He knew that anyone could change, but this person would never change. They were still friends. However, he was getting further and further away from his friend. He was so far away that he could only see his back. "Yes, we know each other. We are good friends. However, I'm not sure if I will be able to meet him. If he wants to leave quietly, no one will notice. As for going home, let me think about it." Chapter 2434. Lu Xiaoyi didn't feel any difficulty in traversing through the lightning. It was just white lightning. He could already withstand it without any problems before he achieved the inside body. Now that he had the inside body, it was very easy for him. So what if there was more lightning? It was just the energy of the inside body. His current body gave him the confidence of a true top-notch half-immortal. He was different from the thin-skinned swordsman from before. Only now did he dare to challenge all the heroes of the origin world, regardless of who they were, what orthodoxy they were from, and what their roots were. This was a process. In the past, he would carefully maintain his undefeatable image in battle. Now, he didn't need to, because no one could do it. Compared to the awkward battle between him and the immortal Pung several hundred years ago, he had a qualitative improvement in two aspects: the insight body and the purple sword intent. It was also because of this confidence that he didn't care about being Linglong's nanny for a period of time. Not to mention the resentment from the karmic memories. Even if a real person came here, it would be a piece of cake. With this kind of mood, he dived deeper and deeper into the dense lightning pool. He gradually approached the lightning planet at the center. That wasn't a planet at all, but an abnormally powerful lightning ball. It was just that because of the ingenious concealment, the lightning seemed to have substance, giving off the feeling of a real planet. The purple lightning purgatory was in this fake planet. This was what Old Man Wenji told him personally. The weak but omnipresent lightning surrounded him. It became denser and denser, forming a human-shaped lightning ball around his body. It became more and more bloated until it was impossible to tell that there was a person inside. But in reality, others couldn't feel the power of the lightning at all. This was because no matter how powerful the lightning was, it would be completely devoured by his inside body. He could freely choose how much energy to leave behind to strengthen his body, or he could directly use his inside body to extract the energy. All the white and gray holes in the universe were his outlets. This was a small part of the application of the Tao of devouring. It had to be admitted that it was simply unsolvable in battle or in a complicated environment. Just like this, he approached the lightning planet and cautiously circled it. He measured the strength of the lightning and the upper limit he chose to withstand to see if there was enough margin of safety. It wasn't that he didn't trust Old Man Wenji. This was his habit, a good habit, a habit that could save his life. This Lei Xing's strength was unfathomable. If a cultivator were to pass by, most of them would disdain the white lightning outside. There were too many lightning anomalies like this in the origin world, and many of them contained the profound meaning of the great Tao. However, the dense lightning pool didn't show anything on the surface, and all of its secrets were hidden in the center of the lightning star. Even if there were really powerful beings passing by and noticing the abnormality of the thunderstar, they would not be able to barge in. This was because this place did not accept other races. Only the numinous treasures were allowed to enter. The reason why Lu Xiaoyi had the confidence to enter was because Wenji had given him a pot ear. He could guess that this might be the old man's actual ears, but he could not determine the old man's true form through the kettle ears. Was it a pot-bellied kettle, or a thin-necked flask, or a chamber pot, or a big teapot? Since the old man didn't want to talk about it, he didn't ask too much. With this kettle ear, Xiao Chun could freely enter and exit the purple thunder purgatory. That was about it. After circling the thunderstar a few times, Lu Xiaoyi crashed into the purple thunder purgatory. Here, the lightning changed color. It was a shocking sight. His eyes were filled with purple lightning. Some were as thick as a vat, some were as fine as rain, some were spiraling, some were flashing like waterfalls, some were snake-shaped, some were ball-shaped, some were forked, some were cobweb-like. Everything you could think of. However, the purple lightning did not strike him. In this dangerous space filled with violent energy disturbances, it was as if every lightning bolt had its own life. It had its own thoughts and knew what it should do and who it should strike. Lu Xiaoyi leisurely wandered around the lightning storm. This took him some time, because there were extremely strong lightning fluctuations everywhere, and his spiritual sense could not reach far. Therefore, even though the space of the thunderstar was not big, he still needed some time to walk around. He found a total of 3 places with abnormal lightning. There were 3 innate numinous treasures that were receiving the lightning of the heavenly Tao. In other words, in these few hundred years, 3 numinous treasure immortal monarchs had met with misfortune and were banished. A pagoda, a lamp, and an inkstone. This pagoda was, of course, the exquisite pagoda. Although this was the first time Lu Xiaoyi saw the real body of Lord Linglong, he was very familiar with this aura. According to his contact with Taoist Hai and in the exquisite world, in the limited conversation between the heavenly eye and the great monarch, he could tell. Of course, the most important thing was that, among the three innate numinous treasures, the exquisite pagoda was in the worst situation. At the lamp and the inkstone, there was basically only purple lightning encircling them. It was a long and vast process to strip the innate numinous treasures of millions of years of memory and accumulation of strength. Because of the loss of the immortal lattice, all of this became possible. However, because of the sturdiness of the innate numinous treasures, they had an unimaginable persistence in what they had grasped. Even if their immortal lattice was taken away, there was no power that could take away everything in an instant. Therefore, they had to use the lightning to strip them away. This was a normal process after the innate numinous treasures were banished. The danger was not great, and it was just a procedure. Just like how the lamp and the inkstone were surrounded by purple lightning, the things they had obtained in the immortal court were being stripped away. However, the exquisite pagoda was different. The lightning encircling the exquisite pagoda was especially numerous and strange. It was as if the lightning had a consciousness. It was as if they had an irreconcilable enmity with the exquisite pagoda. Lu Xiaoyi finally understood the process. The purple lightning stripped away the memories of Lord Linglong. These memories included the countless orders he had given during his immortal monarch days. The result of these orders was that countless evil cultivators were killed. When the memories were stripped away by the purple lightning, they did not disappear without a trace. Instead, it was the resentment that formed the purple lightning of resentment under such a special environment. Through this method, they took revenge on Lord Linglong. As more and more of Lord Linglong's memories were stripped away, the number of such purple lightning of resentment also increased. The pressure also increased, and in the end, it would exceed what Lord Linglong's body could bear. It would cause his originally normal treasured body to return to a chaotic state, causing him to suffer additional irreparable damage. If it was light, he would forever lose the foundation to become an immortal. If it was heavy, he would be directly annihilated. This was what old man Wenji was worried about. Lord Linglong had already been in the purple lightning purgatory for close to 200 years. More than half of the stripping process had been done, and more than half of his memories had been stripped away. At the same time, an extremely large amount of purple lightning of resentment was released. Those purple lightning of resentment that did not have deep resentment would naturally disappear after the attack. However, there would always be those that would not rest until they were dead, those that would seek revenge for the smallest grievance, and those that had a firm will. These powerful purple lightning of resentment gathered more and more, and had already created a huge pressure on the futile, struggling Lord Linglong. What he persisted on was whether or not he could be crushed by these purple lightning of resentment before the stripping process ended. Chapter 2435. Now that he had a rough understanding of the purple lightning purgatory, the only thing left was to choose a suitable time to intervene. This was very important. It could not be too early, or it would affect Lord Linglong's emotions. If he were to be conflicted, it could not be too late either. Once irreversible damage was done, his babysitting mission would lose its meaning. This was more torturous because he had to keep an eye on this place at all times and could not leave his position without permission. At this time, he was a little thankful that old man Wenji did not summon him the moment something happened to Lord Linglong. Otherwise, he would not be able to hold on for hundreds of years. Lord Linglong could no longer recognize him. He was so close, but Lord Linglong did not see him as a threat at all. Could it be the pride of a pre-celestial spiritual treasure? Or the confidence in the rules here? Or could it be that he felt that he was also a pre-celestial spiritual treasure? It was just that he did not see him as a swordsman, someone who had been closely related to him for tens of thousands of years. He had only met Li Wuya 20,000 years ago, but Lord Linglong's lifespan was tens of millions of years. If the purple lightning had already stripped away more than half of his memories, it was very likely that it would strip away the most recent ones first. In other words, he had long forgotten about his connection with the sword vein. This was cultivation, from strangers to acquaintances and then back to strangers again. Carefully observing Lord Linglong's reaction under the purple lightning, Lu Xiaoyi made his own judgment. It could still hold on, so he would not intervene first. Lu Xiaoyi calmed himself down at a suitable distance away from Lord Linglong. Since he was already here, he might as well take things as they came. He really did not have the experience of cultivating in a lightning environment. Although with his current understanding of the great Tao of lightning, things in theory still needed to be tested and tested. This was the best place to test it out. Since the purple lightning purgatory was chosen as the reincarnation place of a pre-celestial spiritual treasure, it must have its own uniqueness. Furthermore, from the way he saw it, it might be helpful for him to create his own heavenly tribulation. Heavenly tribulation and lightning were a match made in heaven. He had the same idea before, to merge lightning into the heavenly tribulation when creating it. However, he did not expect that the process would start from the reincarnation of a spiritual treasure. In cultivation, there were always countless accidents that caught people off guard. Slowly, he retracted his body's image, allowing himself to directly feel the power of the lightning here. From there, he could learn how to absorb the purple lightning to strip away the spirit treasures, as well as how to attack Lord Linglong using the purple lightning of resentment. During this process, he also discovered many special things. For example, in terms of body toughness, innate spiritual treasures were far more tenacious than humans and demonic beasts. It could be said that they were not even on the same level. Under the same circumstances, if it was a human or a primeval beast that suffered the pain of being skinned, it wouldn't take a few hundred years at all. At most, it would take a few decades or even less to strip them back to their original state. However, natural spirit treasures were extremely tough in this aspect. Maybe it's because I don't have pain nerves. The memory of the treasure was so stubborn that it was perversely stubborn. In the fight against the purple thunder, it was like the growth rings of a tree, resisting round after round and never giving up. Purple thunder was just as stubborn. Circle after circle, he cut away circle after circle in the tug-of-war. This was the rule of the heavenly Tao. But the attack of the purple lightning of resentment was different. It was sharper, more direct, and more aggressive. It was not to slowly chip away at something, but to pierce deeply and destroy the core structure of the spirit treasure. In this way, it formed a three-dimensional and complex attack pattern. At any time, it would not stop until one of them was dead. Lu Xiaoyi calmed his mind and slowly integrated into the purple lightning purgatory as an outsider. He observed the formation mechanism, tried to imitate it, and further influenced it. However, he would never touch the normal purple lightning. Instead, he would only touch the purple lightning with resentment. Furthermore, he would try to influence the purple lightning in a roundabout way to verify his understanding of lightning. Time slowly flowed by in a lightning storm. After a few decades, Lord Linglong finally showed signs of fatigue and could not hold on any longer. The main manifestation was that the purple lightning purgatory's speed of stripping had obviously increased, and the usual tenacity had begun to weaken. This was because she had put too much energy into defending against the purple lightning of resentment. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. He had originally thought that he would not need to do anything, but now it seemed that he had attracted too much hatred for Lord Linglong after presiding over the heavens' eye for hundreds of thousands of years. Among them, there was no lack of cunning and quick-witted people with tenacious hearts. When these resentment turned into purple lightning, it was time for them to use everything they had. For the first time, Lu Xiaoyi used his ability in the purple lightning purgatory. He did not use anything else, just using lightning to control lightning. Such a good environment. It would be a pity if he did not use it to train his lightning ability. Under his control, lightning appeared out of thin air. A huge lightning pillar swept across, sweeping away the purple lightning of resentment. But at this time, he felt that something was wrong. Danger! Realizing that something was wrong, Lu Xiaoyi quickly changed into his cave elephant body, and at the same time, prepared for battle. At almost the same time, the purple lightning purgatory shook as if it had suddenly increased in strength. Lightning snakes danced in the air, and their only target was Lu Xiaoyi. Why was he being treated as the main opponent? Lu Xiaoyi did not understand at that moment, so he could only endure it. He felt that the majority of the lightning energy in the Thunder Star had landed on his body. All kinds of lightning were as dense as rain, leaving him no room to breathe. Huge lightning energy was released from his cave elephant body, and his body was like an energy converter starting to operate at full power. At the same time, he continued to attack the purple lightning of resentment. This was his personality. If you don't want me to do something, I will do it. When the purple lightning purgatory suddenly flipped out and started to use him as the main target, he did not forget to observe the situation of the Twinkle Gem Pagoda. The Twinkle Gem Pagoda was still being peeled, and even the strength of the peeling did not change. It could be imagined that the other lamp and inkstone were the same. The purple lightning of resentment was still being produced as usual. This was closely related to the memories released by the Twinkle Gem Pagoda being peeled. The more memories released, the more purple lightning of resentment would appear. The only change was that the purple lightning purgatory was treating him as an opponent, or perhaps a discarded spirit treasure. Clearly, the purple lightning purgatory's energy reserves far exceeded that of dealing with 3 pre-celestial spirit treasures at the same time. Therefore, the remaining energy was added to his body. Furthermore, it was getting stronger and stronger. Lu Xiaoyi was a little depressed. He still did not know the reason, but it was clear that it was not treating him as a spirit treasure to wear him down, because the energy added to his body had already surpassed Lord Linglong. Then was it because it was dissatisfied with humans interfering with the spirit treasure reincarnation? Chapter 2436. Outside the high-density lightning pool, the Toulon cultivators were still waiting, but there were fewer of them. The true monarch with a poor sense of direction was still there, but some of the Yuanying disciples had left. After all, they couldn't possibly give up their precious cultivation time just to wait for an illusory legend. 100 years might not matter to a true monarch, but to the Yuanying, it was very important. The Yuanying only had a lifespan of 1,200 years, so they didn't have much time to waste. Ever since the legendary half-immortal almighty expert had entered, the dense lightning pool had not changed at all. The lightning pool was still covered in dense white lightning. However, all of this had changed after a few decades. The white lightning suddenly turned blue. Just by feeling it from afar, one could tell that the lightning's intensity had increased by another level. This was the first time in the history of the high-density lightning pool that this had happened. Shu, what does it mean that the lightning turned blue? The directionally challenged idiot was indifferent. He leisurely took a sip of wine. What else can it mean? It stirred up, right? That's not strange. What I find strange is that it took him a few decades to stir it up. Has he become more mature as he gets older? One of the Yuanying disciples was very uneasy. Martial uncle, if that almighty is really so powerful, could he have stirred up the high-density lightning pool? This is the only celestial phenomenon that our Toulon star system can bring out, and he can also study the Tao realm. The directionally challenged idiot smiled. Cultivators can't rely on celestial phenomena to survive. Can't they cultivate without a lightning pool? I don't know whether or not he would have stirred up the lightning pool, but that guy has done this many times before. But if you think about it this way, maybe this is a microcosm of the changes in the universe and the changing of eras. Without this shit stir, would the high-density lightning pool have existed forever? I don't think so. The Yuanying disciples were speechless. The changes in the universe weren't something they could recklessly predict. The directionally challenged idiot sighed inwardly. In front of his disciples, he was relaxed and confident, but in reality, he was very uneasy. How good could he be about the future? As for himself, he had already left the mainstream cultivation world for 1 or 2,000 years. How could he grasp the real situation? He had been brought here by the spatial turbulence during a fortuitous encounter. This shouldn't have happened to a true monarch. True monarchs had a certain degree of spatial ability and were able to escape from this kind of aimless and passive teleportation. However, he could only blame himself for playing too big. In fact, it was also because the end of the era was near and his friends were already ahead of him, so he was a little anxious. Everyone understood that it was harder than ascending to the heavens to truly achieve a state of mind like still water. It was precisely because of this mood that he brought himself to this godforsaken place. After flying for a few hundred years, he finally understood that he had already arrived at the outer circle of the universe and could no longer fly back by relying on flight alone. When he was tossed here, he was only at the Master stage. He still had over 1,000 years left to live. He couldn't even reach the inner circle. Thus, he turned back and returned to the only cultivation realm he had passed by on his way, the Earth Discourse Galaxy. He decided to stay here and wait for an opportunity to change. When he first came to Toulon, he was depressed and dispirited. He even fought with the native cultivators because of a disagreement. With his methods, he conquered the entire Toulon region. It didn't feel interesting at all. It wasn't in his character to pick a general from a group of dwarves. Fortunately, there was no unresolvable hatred. As time passed, he slowly accepted the fact that he was trapped in Toulon. His state of mind gradually became peaceful, and he began to integrate into the Toulon cultivation system. This wasn't in his character. For someone who had always been proud and outgoing, such a change was really inconceivable. However, he was also a cultivator with a Tao root. Naturally, he followed his own fate and found a Tao opportunity in the process. His orthodoxy was the most outstanding in the mainstream cultivation world of the universe. It might not be comparable to the 3 pure ones, but it wasn't far behind. He was very knowledgeable and had a very deep understanding. He was also a good friend with a forthright and generous temperament. After over 1,000 years, he had become a guest of honor in Toulon's orthodoxy. Even if he didn't reveal the roots of his sect, he could still play a role in guiding Toulon's orthodoxy. In this way, he was now a leading figure in the Toulon cultivation world. No one treated him as an outsider. He was the #1 cultivator in Toulon. In this process, which seemed to be a last resort, he unknowingly broke through to the primordial soul stage, and then broke through to the yang soul stage. His personality had changed greatly. Only now did he understand that being thrown into this barren cultivation desert wasn't a disaster, but a blessing. Fortunately, he didn't stay depressed. Instead, he adjusted himself in time and walked on the right path that belonged to him. Everyone's path was different. He had always wanted to keep up with his friends, especially that freak swordsman. However, the more he followed, the more confused he became. The more confused he became, the slower he became. In the end, he became depressed and thought that he wasn't a seed of Tao. But now, he understood that he had found his own direction. When he was willing to be ordinary on Toulon, ordinary was far away from him. Therefore, when that freak appeared in front of him again after 1 or 2,000 years, of course he was happy. However, he wasn't so eager to return. His sect didn't need him, but Toulon really needed him. He was well aware of the worries of the Yuanying disciples. Over the past few decades, there had been at least 7 or 8 Yuanying disciples here to accompany him. Even his friend from Toulon had come to drink with him. How could their real purpose be to see that legendary figure? After all, legends were just legends. The people of Toulon knew very well that legends wouldn't stay in Toulon forever. They were just passers-by. The only one who could stay was himself, who had no sense of direction. The cultivators didn't know how to persuade him because they couldn't. Man walked to higher places and water flowed to lower places. Therefore, they had to use this kind of method. Over the past few decades, as long as Talon could fly out of the void, they would fly over to accompany him for a few years. If he was an emotional person, it would be difficult to ignore such emotional fetters. He didn't speak. There were too many changes. Even as a young soul, it was difficult for him to convince himself. What should he choose? Should he continue to stay in Talon for more than 1,000 years and prove something? Or should he return to his sect and devote himself to the vigorous mainstream cultivation world? Going back 2,000 years, he didn't even need to think about it. But now, it was incomparably difficult for him. Therefore, although he looked relaxed, he had no one to talk to about the torment in his heart. Fortunately, the mystery would be revealed soon. Based on his experience, as long as this guy started to stir shit, he wouldn't have much time to leave. In this universe, there weren't many people or celestial phenomena that could withstand his stirring. From afar, a stream of light rushed over. It was a soul perfected lord from Talon. Senior brother, it's not good. The envoys from the Kongia realm are here again. There are many of them. Other than the perfected lord, there's also a half-immortal. Chapter 24:37. The Kongia realm was the closest cultivation realm to Talon. Their overall cultivation strength was about the same. In terms of location, it was even closer to the periphery than Talon. The distance between the two realms was more than 1,000 years. In theory, these two realms would never cross each other. For these two realms that didn't have many monarchs, unless they set off toward the other realm right after becoming a monarch, they couldn't go in the wrong direction. In the end, if they didn't succeed, they would be in an awkward situation where their primordial spirit couldn't even return home. Therefore, Talon and the Kongia realm didn't know about each other's existence at all in their respective cultivation histories. Until one day, a half-immortal appeared in the Talon galaxy and a half-immortal appeared in the Kongia realm. The two of them crossed paths in the exterior realm. As for how they got along, no one knew. When a big figure appeared in a small place, he had absolute authority. No one dared to ask about it. This was the rule. The two half-immortals could be said to appreciate each other or sympathize with each other. In any case, when they got together to talk, wow, their realms weren't far from each other. Of course, this not far was too far in the eyes of the mainstream cultivators in the inner circle. However, to the outer circle, it really wasn't far. This was because the distance between the cultivation realms here was more than 1,000 years. If you went further into the outer circle, the distance between the realms was even more than 1,000 years. They were basically two different cultivation worlds. The half-immortal patriarch became friends in the exterior realm. Of course, he wanted the two realms to be close to each other. Although the distance of 1,000 years made the distance between the lips and teeth too far, how big did one's face have to be to hold such a big mouth? Disaster came from the sky when one was sitting in a house. They also knew that no powerful cultivation force would be interested in them. However, what if it wasn't a human? What if it was Zerg or some other cultivation group? Having an ally always made people feel more at ease. They could support each other when they were in the same place. Without a thigh to rely on, the weak chickens could only huddle together for warmth. Therefore, after the two of them reached a consensus with each other, they joined forces and began to build a space transmission channel between the two realms. This was a problem that had never been solved in the mainstream cultivation world. The fact that they could solve it between the two realms was not because of how powerful they were, but because the outer circle of the universe was much easier to navigate through space compared to the inner circle. Fortune and misfortune were interdependent, and it was the same in other aspects. When one's position was not worth mentioning compared to the inner circle in terms of spiritual opportunity, the heavenly Tao would also compensate the outer circle in other aspects. It was just that the spatial passageway was much easier than the inner circle. It was stable and had a strong directivity. Under the guidance of the two half-immortals, the two realms began to construct the thousand-year-old spatial passage. They spent a lot of time and resources to complete the construction. During this process, it wasn't as if there weren't any cultivators who doubted whether such a passage would lead a wolf into the house. But in view of the fact that this was the image project of the half-immortal old ancestor, and both sides had similar strength, and each side had a half-immortal, it seemed like there was nothing to worry about. What happened next was simple. Just like all the conspiracies in the cultivation world, when you made the wrong choice, disaster would naturally come. First, the old ancestor of Shangsai was killed in the exterior heaven. Then, the Kongjia realm's control and infiltration of the Tulan planet. One after another, unable to find the truth, how could the cultivators of the lower world investigate a murder case of the exterior heaven that happened thousands of years ago? Such a murder case happened every day in the exterior heaven. What was the big deal? In the entanglement, the Tulan cultivators finally understood that their old ancestor Shangsai had been deceived by the Kongjia realm's lower pass. The reason why the Kongjia realm was like this was to jump into the inner circle of the universe. They had succeeded several times. The method was very simple, but it was filled with patience. They built a spatial passageway between the two realms and then occupied the nest of the magpie. Every time they arrived at a new place, they would patiently develop the local cultivation world and then wait for the next target to jump. In the past 10,000 years, they had jumped from the outer circle to the inner circle several times. Each time, they used the same trick. But in the vast and empty outer circle of the universe, who would notice that a cultivation world would quietly change owners? Having no friends in the universe was the sorrow of a lonely cultivation planet. Their sufferings were unknown to others. But this time, the situation had changed. The aggressive advance of the Kongjia realm had to be stopped because their old ancestor of the lower pass, the half-immortal, had suddenly disappeared. And in Tulan, there was an experienced and knowledgeable person with no sense of direction. When the two realms with similar strength fought again, the Kongjia realm had no advantage at all. Therefore, the Kongjia realm had to stop jumping, but the Tulan people could not find the specific location of the spatial passageway. This was because the passageway had been blocked by the half-immortal of the lower pass. The matter was delayed for more than 1,000 years. The Tulan people gradually forgot that they once had such a great enemy. But now, suddenly, the people of Kongjia realm came back? Half-immortal? Is it the same lower pass? The person with no sense of direction frowned. He had only been in Tulan for a limited time. He had not seen the half-immortal of the lower pass in Tulan. Therefore, he had only heard of his name, but had never seen him in person. But the old cultivators of Tulan had seen him. The immortal E-Master smiled bitterly and nodded. It's him. It shouldn't be wrong. And he brought all the great cultivators of Kongjia realm. It seems that they won't stop until Tulan is defeated. Senior brother, what do you think? For the orthodoxy of Tulan, there were only a few immortal young masters. They were old and young, and their strength was very ordinary in the cultivation world of the universe. They did not have the ability to fight against a half-immortal. Therefore, the only hope was the strongest young master of Tulan, who had no sense of direction. In theory, a powerful young master could fight against a first severance, or a second decay, half-immortal. After all, they were only one step away from each other. Especially for some powerful orthodoxies, killing those of a higher level seemed to be not just a legend. In their hearts, this Taoist elite from the mainstream inner circle orthodoxy, who had no sense of direction, could possibly have such strength. But only the person with no sense of direction knew that fighting against those of a higher level naturally existed. He had more than one friend, and he could even easily kill the most abnormal swordsman. But he was not. He had worked hard in this direction before, but in the end he realized that this was not his own path. It was also because he was with these abnormal monsters that he lost his mind in the end. Otherwise, he would not have acted rashly and been thrown here. Here he had found the path that truly belonged to him. But now, the cruel reality forced him to make another choice. Should he go back and try to fight against those of a higher level again? Or should he follow the path that he had comprehended now and not make any unnecessary resistance? Taking a deep breath, he looked at the hopeful eyes of the Yuaniing disciples and smiled gently. Okay, let's go back and see what kind of monster this lower pass half-immortal is. His cultivation method could change, but the pride buried deep in his heart would never change. In this regard, he was not inferior to his abnormal friends. Chapter 2438. The purple thunder purgatory that surrounded Lu Xiaoyi had reached a new level of strength. Furthermore, Lu Xiaoyi was not sure where the final limit of the purple thunder purgatory was. He had no other choice but to endure it. At this awkward stage, he did not think that old man Wenji was trying to frame him. The reason was simple. The purple thunder purgatory only had one goal, and that was to expel him from the prison, not to kill him in one go. Only then would there be such a gradual increase in the power of thunder, and only then would there be the right to leave reserved for him. The Purple Thunder Purgatory's hidden goal was simple. The reincarnation of spirit treasures was not to be interfered with by humans. Lu Xiaoyi was caught between a rock and a hard place, because old man Wenji's information was not accurate. Just based on one Ji's ear-piercing pot, there was no way to hide his human identity. Did he really not know, or did he underestimate the intelligence of the Purple Thunder Purgatory? What influenced the Purgatory's actions was not a living being, but a set of rules from ancient times. It could automatically distinguish the attributes of living beings entering and exiting the Purgatory. If it was a spirit treasure, then there would be rules for spirit treasures. If it was a foreign species, then there would be a plan to expel them. There were no likes or dislikes, only impartiality under the rules. Thus, the expulsion of Lu Xiaoyi had never stopped. Similarly, the extortion of the exquisite step was not affected at all. In this aspect, the division between public and private was very clear. What Lu Xiaoyi was truly worried about was whether his actions would have any effect on the return of the exquisite step. Wenji said that it would not, but that was only a theoretical deduction. The Purgatory had automatically determined that Lu Xiaoyi was an invading foreign species. Then, how could everything he did not have anything to do with Lord Linglong? Retreating now was not a good choice. He had to hand over the initiative. The exquisite pagoda would be caught in two types of danger. The endless resentment of the Purple Thunder and the Purple Thunder Purgatory's judgment that the exquisite pagoda had cheated. Since he had already somewhat rashly barged in, there was only one path left. Persevere and see if there were any other changes while he was persevering. There would definitely be changes. He, who had cultivated for close to 4,000 years, was no longer unfamiliar with the workings of the heavenly Tao. This was especially so when the Purple Thunder Purgatory was unable to do anything to him, even after going all out. Changes would definitely come, and only then would it be the time for them to reach a compromise. Therefore, what he needed to do now was to force out the power of the Purple Thunder Purgatory. The idea was good, but it was a little overconfident. In the following period of time, Lu Xiaoyi once again sank into the pain of his own sins. He seemed to have forgotten that a place like the Purple Thunder Purgatory was used to deal with the numinous treasure, Immortal Lord. Even though numinous treasure, Immortal Lord's immortal lattice had been removed, his strength was still incomparable to a half-immortal's. It was easy to imagine how much pressure he, a human who had yet to become an immortal, would feel when his immortal lattice was removed. The intense changes in the Thunder Purgatory could be seen from the dense thunder pool outside the Thunder Purgatory. Because Earth was in trouble, only one Yuaniing disciple was left outside the thunder pool to observe the situation. In her eyes, the originally white thunder pool first turned blue, and then green, cyan, yellow, red, and yellow after the others left. The thunder aura of the entire dense thunder pool had also become extremely unstable, as if it would collapse at any time. This caused the young Yuaniing disciple to feel uneasy. In her heart, she blamed this legendary figure for coming at the wrong time. He was indeed a universe-level *T stirrer, choosing to join in the fun when others were in trouble. Since Martial Uncle had left with the others, there had to be one person left here, no matter how unwilling she was. She had been thinking that if she left now and deliberately missed this legendary figure, would Martial Uncle, who had a poor sense of direction, not leave? This thought flashed through her mind, but she ignored it in the end. Cultivation should not be so selfish. In the outer circle of the cultivation world, the cultivator's thoughts were not as complicated as those in the inner circle. She continued to wait, waiting for a possible change. Would the dense thunder pool collapse? Or would that legendary figure appear? The world of cultivation was full of ups and downs. Originally, they were living a good and carefree life, but now, everything had suddenly changed. The most famous thunder pool, celestial phenomenon in the Earth star system, was wavering on the verge of collapse. As for her own home planet, who knew how many old friends she would see when she returned? Did the flag on the city wall change to that of the king? She didn't know. So she could only do what was within her power and wait here bitterly. Lu Xiaoyi pushed his body's insightful image to the extreme, but he felt a bit full. Was it painful? In theory, there was no limit to the amount of energy the insightful image could transfer. He could transfer as much as he wanted. In any case, he was transferring to the entire universe. So why would he be afraid of not having a place to store the energy? However, even if there was no limit to the amount of energy he could transfer, there was a limit to the amount he could transfer per unit of time. This was determined by the strength of his insightful image body. It had only been a few hundred years since he cultivated the insightful image body. In the eyes of mortals, this was a long time, but for half-immortals like them, it was a newly cultivated skill. Because the amount of lightning energy he could transfer per unit of time was too great, his insightful image body, which he thought was strong enough, faintly felt like it was being torn apart. This was a dangerous sign. How long would it take for Lord Linglong to finish? He didn't know. The process of innate spiritual treasure was a mystery to all human cultivators. He could only guess based on Old Man Wen Ji's speculation that it would take several decades to 100 years. This was the amount of time he needed to persevere. Based on the current situation, it was basically impossible. Right now, he could still help Lord Linglong block some of the purple lightning resentment. However, if the purple lightning purgatory continued to increase the intensity of the lightning, he would soon be unable to protect himself. From the looks of it, his perseverance was meaningless, because he would never be able to touch the bottom line of the purple lightning purgatory. This was a wonder left behind from ancient times. It was a place used by the immortal court to cut off the immortal monarchs. It was not something a mere half-immortal like him could contend against, even if he was one of the strongest half-immortals. Lu Xiaoyi was depressed. In terms of the mission, this trip to the Thunder Purgatory might set a precedent for him to fail. When the opponent was no longer a cultivator, but an ancient heavenly phenomenon, it was only a matter of time. This old man Wen Ji had given him a huge problem. The swordsman's slogan was to never admit defeat. However, a slogan was ultimately a slogan. Man's will may not be the truth. Facing an opponent like the Purple Lightning Purgatory, Lu Xiaoyi didn't even know where to cut with his sword. Furthermore, destroying the Purple Lightning Purgatory was unrealistic, because he couldn't delay Lord Linglong's tribulation. A nanny was the most troublesome role. The pressure was getting bigger and bigger. It was so big that he had to make a choice between protecting himself and protecting Lord Linglong. Sighing, Lu Xiaoyi had no choice but to use his final move. Sword Will. It was also purple. Chapter 2439. The purple lightning that filled the sky in the Purple Lightning Purgatory suddenly disappeared. This was completely out of Lu Xiaoyi's expectations. In an instant, He had returned to the initial state when he had just entered the purple lightning purgatory. It was like an intruder being surrounded by people. While everyone was shouting to beat him up, someone suddenly shouted, "Disperse, this is second uncle's third cousin." It was obvious that the purple lightning purgatory had acknowledged the purple aura he had obtained from the ancient dirt. It thought they were of the same origin, so it did not pursue the matter. This was the limitation of the rules. It wouldn't look at what was coming in from the outside, but would only look at the inner essence of the thing on the inside. Under the convergence of essence, what had entered did not seem to be important. Lu Xiaoyi instantly became relaxed. Not only was there no longer a trace of purple lightning attacking him, but the lightning he could control was also very different from before. It was as easy as moving his arm, and he could control it with his mind's will. However, he did not use this power to interfere too much with the purple lightning's stripping of Lord Linglong. These were two different matters. Lord Linglong's tribulation was the rules. Only by passing this tribulation would there be a possibility for the future. He should not interrupt this process. Otherwise, he would not be helping it, but harming it. As for his relationship with the purple lightning purgatory, that was another matter. But now, he had a lot of time and energy to study this problem. If the purple aura he obtained from the ancient dirt was one of the 13 strands of purple aura when the universe was in chaos, then would the purple lightning purgatory here come from another strand of purple aura? What was the necessary connection between them? Were they of the same origin? Or was there something else that he did not understand? What could the purple aura bring him? In this universe, there were too many inexplicable things. There were so many that the higher his cultivation, the more things he did not understand. Because he no longer focused on resisting, he began to permeate his consciousness into the source of the purple lightning purgatory. In the past, this was impossible, but now, the purple lightning purgatory seemed to have opened up to him. He seemed to have come to a world of chaos. In the void, 13 strands of purple aura appeared. Thus, the universe began to change from dead silence to full of vitality. After that, the great Tao appeared. Lu Xiaoyi immersed himself in it. This would be of great help to him in the future. He would have a deeper understanding of the essence, formation, and changes of the universe. He could also learn a lot from this understanding. This was the last time he would fine-tune his new great Tao in order to fully adapt to this universe. One conjecture was that the so-called minor epic transition was the beginning of the formation of the great Tao, which was the direction the universe was heading towards. If it was the minor epic transition, it would be pushed back to before the formation of the purple cloud, which was the true beginning of all life forms. That would be a true disaster. It was because of this understanding that he had never thought about how to obtain power from the purple energy. He was afraid that his selfishness would destroy the entire universe. It was enough to understand the profound principles behind it. He had calmed down in the purple thunder purgatory. The high-density lightning pool that he saw on the outside was that everything had returned to normal. The lightning array had returned to its previous state of white lightning. Furthermore, the energy ripples of the entire lightning pool had become stable again without any ripples. Little Yuanying, who was left behind, was completely confused. Was this the legendary figure who had died inside? Or was it that he could not stir up the lightning pool at all? However, the order she received was to stay here and wait for the next person to replace him. However, as time passed, year after year, there was no movement from the high-density lightning pool. Furthermore, no one from the mother planet, Talon, came to replace him. She knew very well what this meant. It was impossible that he had forgotten. How could someone as important as her martial uncle, who was a road addict, forget such a huge matter? Something had happened to Talon, and it was not a small matter. Therefore, her staying here might be the most helpful thing for Talon. It was meaningless for her to go back alone, unless she brought this legendary figure back. Yuanying's fervent gaze landed on the high-density lightning pool. Her heart was filled with hope. Could it be that the legendary figure had really become a legendary figure? Every day felt like a year. Using such a feeling to describe her current state of mind was the most appropriate. If not for the fact that she was not strong enough, she would have rushed in and shouted for the legendary figure to come out. Her position was also as close to the high-density lightning pool as possible. She was so close that she had exceeded the safety margin of being a Yuanying. As long as there was a fluctuation in the lightning pool, she would be involved in it. The purpose of everything was so that she would not miss the appearance of the legendary figure. She knew that her realm was too far away, so she could only get closer. Everyone had their own responsibilities. Her martial uncle, who was a road addict, went back to take up the heavy responsibility of supporting Talon. Her martial brothers followed him. Because she was the youngest Yuanying, and because she was a Kuan cultivator, they left the hope of survival to her. However, she knew that staying here was also meaningful. Meaning needed to be supported by patience. Outside the high-density lightning pool, she waited for dozens of years. No one came out of the lightning pool, and Talon did not send any news. It was as if everything did not exist, was illusory and unreal. In the process of waiting, it was difficult for her to find the time to cultivate, because she was too close to the lightning, and because of the disturbance of the lightning energy, her divine sense was useless here. She could only use her eyes to look at it without blinking. The lightning in the high-density lightning pool changed from white to blue, then to green, to red, yellow, purple, and finally back to white. She was not sure what she was looking at, but she knew that there was an indescribable, special feeling. She could only remember it in her heart and relive it when her realm was higher in the future. On this day, there was still no fluctuation in the high-density lightning pool. Of course, there was a possibility that there was a change, but could a Yuanying of her realm not feel it? In her sight, she felt as if there was a black shadow in the thousands of lightning. It was extremely faint, and it appeared for a fleeting moment. The shadow was too faint, and the speed was too fast. She could not judge it at all. Was it a person's shadow, or was it an accidental black spot? However, she did not want to miss it. She could only puff up her dantian and shout with all her might. "Fellow cultivator, please wait. Please wait." There was no response. It was as if nothing had happened in front of her, or as if it had already happened. She realized that she might have missed out on something. She had waited for dozens of years without blinking, but in the end, it was all for naught. She felt very wronged. She, who had never cried in the hundreds of years of cultivation, had a trace of moisture in the corner of her eyes. Even with all her efforts, she could not save the Toulon galaxy. She knew that once the legendary figure left, she would not be able to find him. In desperation, she took the risk and leaped into the lightning array. She just leaped into the air when she felt that her body was suspended in the air. She could not move, and a lazy voice sounded in her ear. "Please, in the future, don't call anyone fellow cultivator. Please wait." I'm dizzy from hearing that. Chapter 2440. Yuanying was at a loss of what to do. She was like a little chick that had been caught by someone. She could not use any of her abilities. However, she still had some willpower and quick-wittedness. She immediately realized who had caught her. She quickly shouted, "Lu, exalted immortal, please spare my life. A noble friend asked me to wait here. We'll meet again when you come out." That person exclaimed softly, "Ma Dan, my reputation has even spread to this godforsaken place. Little girl, your cultivation level is not high, but you have the guts to charge into the thunder pool. Do you want to die? Let me ask you, who ordered you to do this? And you call him so intimately? If you can't tell me, you'll suffer later." After the nascent soul was flung away, it finally returned to normal. His mana and spirit were unaffected. When he looked up again, he saw an ordinary-looking young Taoist standing not far away. He did not emit any aura at all, just like a mortal. Even Uncle Master, who was a road idiot, could not be so restrained. She had already confirmed in her heart that she could not have any thoughts in front of such a person. This was the peak of the half-immortal level. I'm Yun Chantian. Uncle Master, who is a road idiot, ordered me to do this. Uncle Master, who is a road idiot, said that I'm an old friend of yours. We haven't seen each other for 1 or 2,000 years, so he ordered me to wait here. Lu Xiaoyi was a little confused. Road idiot? I think you're a face idiot. I don't have such a friend. Your name is unfamiliar, and this place is also unfamiliar. You're sneaking around. What are you trying to do, huh? With this, Yun Xianqian immediately felt as if she was in hell. There was no vision, only a thin line between life and death. She was shocked. Under the power that was beyond her understanding, she could not summon up any courage to resist. However, after waiting for decades, she could not retreat, no matter who it was, even if it was a real immortal. She believed that Uncle Master, who was a road idiot, was not lying. She forced herself to calm down, even if it was as if her soul was trembling under the pressure. She still gritted her teeth. The people of Toulon have always been open and honest. They never lie. We don't ask for anything from you, so why should we bow and scrape? If you don't believe me, just leave. A dignified half-immortal actually dares to bully me, a mere Yuanying. Lu Xiaoyi was stunned. He wasn't someone who bullied the weak, but such an obvious lie was really disdainful. There were many people in the universe who knew him. If he wanted to meet him, he could just say so. Old friends? He didn't have many old friends in his life. He could count them with 2 hands. Therefore, he wanted to shock her so that she would back off. He didn't want to harm her, but this little girl's eyes were full of stubbornness. Obviously, she was not faking it, which made him a little doubtful. Bad sense of direction? Just this name? Do you have any other Taoist names? Yun Qianqian finally let out a sigh of relief. No, Teacher Lu has only been known by this name ever since he came to Toulon. Lu Xiaoyi immediately noticed the abnormality in her words. This person with no sense of direction is not a local cultivator of Toulon. Seeing that there was hope, Yun Qianqian kept nodding her head. No. Teacher Lu came from the inner circle of the universe, but he never said where he came from. However, Teacher Lu appeared in Toulon 1,200 years ago. Later, he said that he could never go back, so he took root here. Lu Xiaoyi's heart skipped a beat. 1,200 years. If he took into account the wandering in the universe, it should be around 1,000 years. He did have a missing friend, so the timeline matched. Therefore, he raised his hand. A vivid image of a Taoist appeared in the void, eating meat and drinking wine. But this person, Yun Qianqian was completely sure with just a glance. Master, this is Teacher Lu. So you really know each other and are friends? Lu Xiaoyi sighed. Not friends, brothers. Which direction is Toulon? Take me there. Yun Qianqian felt her body become light and was taken over by someone again. However, she was not held in his hand, but sat on his shoulder. She felt a little shy. She felt that this senior was crazy and did not care about the etiquette of the cultivation world at all. He did things casually and naturally. Before she could speak, the senior patted her waist. I'm sorry for being rash earlier. This place is really too far away, and the information is not smooth. How can it be so coincidental? I thought you were deceiving me. Come, tell me. That guy knew that I was in the Thunder Pool, but why didn't he wait for me? Why did he go back to enjoy himself and leave you, a little girl, to wait for others in the universe? It's too dangerous. Is this something a brother would do? Yun Qianqian felt that this senior was a very contradictory person. He was obviously thousands of years old, but his face was still very young. He did things without scruples and did not care about the defense of Chinkoan Pass. That hand of his patted everywhere, but when he spoke, it made her feel very comfortable. At the level of a half-immortal, his apology was not pretentious at all. Everything was natural, making people feel that he was magnanimous. The demeanor of a senior made people look up to him. In such an atmosphere, the previous restraint and awkwardness disappeared, and she was much more eloquent. Soon, she told him the cause and effect. As she spoke, she felt as if she had become a stream of light. Originally, there were still 3 months to travel to Saturn, but in less than a day, she had already covered more than half of the distance. Such a speed was simply unimaginable. This was the result of the fast speed, and her directions were a little chaotic. She now believed that as long as the legend under her was there, the crisis of Saturn would be solved. But the problem was that decades had passed. Was there still time? If the legend solved the problem in the end, but she was the only major cultivator left on Saturn, then what was the point of such a recovery? Master, do you think Master Lu and the others can hold on? Lu Xiaoyi smiled. No problem. If he didn't see me enter the high-density thunder pool, that guy might have a life-and-death struggle with the Kongyo world. But since he knows that I'm nearby, he's not so stupid as to perish together with others. Little girl, don't worry. That guy is full of tricks. He must be stalling for time, waiting for me to come and save him. Lu Xiaoyi said so, but in fact, it was that guy's character. However, the time was too long. Decades had passed, and the other side had a half-immortal. This stalling tactic was not easy to drag on. Few of his former friends were still alive. Every one of them was precious. He did not expect that guy to come to such a place after losing contact for 2,000 years. By the way, what's the realm of that Master Lu of yours now? I remember that he was an Yin god when he left. He can't be back to normal now, can he? Yin Shanqian smiled faintly. I know that Master Lu has been in the Sun God realm for many years. Lu Xiaoyi finally breathed a sigh of relief. Sun God? Strictly speaking, he was only one step behind him. It seemed that he could hold on for some time. Chapter 2441. The Toulon Star was a medium-sized region. Its spiritual vigor was barely superior. It was nothing in the inner circle of a universe, but in the outer circle, it was a good place with good feng shui. But here, due to the long distance between each region, it didn't matter whether it was a place with good fortune or not. There were rarely battles between regions, because doing so meant that you might waste most of your life on marching. If you failed, you might not even have the chance to return. It was because of such a situation that the half-immortal of the Toulon Star, Kai, made such a big mistake in making friends. He let a wolf into the house. Once a cultivator in a small place was lucky enough to become a half-immortal, he would be easily blinded by the strange and variegated exterior masters. This was the consequence of not being broad-minded enough. But in the current Toulon Star, everything was not over yet. The cultivators of the Toulon Star had built an extremely sturdy tortoise shell in the most sturdy part of the Toulon Star. It was actually the mountain guarding formation. It was impossible for a cultivation region like the Toulon Star to have a grand membrane of heaven and earth. It couldn't be done because there weren't enough high-level half-immortals. The so-called mountain guarding formation might be effective for the Yuaning immortals, but it was a little redundant for a half-immortal mighty figure. A half-immortal could already influence the changes of the 5 elements of a star to a certain extent. If you relied on the formation on a region star, you could imagine the limitations. It was also because of this that the cultivators of the Kongja world agreed to use the mountain guarding formation as a bet. If they broke the formation, the Toulon Star would submit. If they couldn't break it, the Kongja world would go. They bet that they had a time limit of 100 years. This was also a common thing in the cultivation world. It was to destroy the spiritual vein structure of the Toulon Star. After all, the cultivators of the Kongja world came here to occupy a region. In the future, they might take root here for at least 1,000 years. Of course, they didn't want to take over a dilapidated region. This bet was in line with the wishes of both sides. But in the mountain guarding formation, the cultivators of the Kongja world realized that they might have been fooled. This was a mountain guarding formation that was completely beyond their understanding. The operation mechanism of all the formations was new, strange, and ingenious. Because it was a bet, they could only use normal methods to break the formation and not destroy it with brute force. What was worse was that the Toulonians had cleverly chosen the source of the Toulon spiritual vein as the location of the Toulon formation. Barbaric destruction meant destroying the spiritual vigor of Toulon. No one wanted to obtain a domain that had lost its spiritium. That would mean that there was no point in occupying it. Of course, they didn't know that all of this was done by a Taoist who had drifted here. He had also used the inner circle's orthodox Taoist method of setting up formations. It wasn't something they could fully understand. Perhaps the middle and low-level cultivators had long forgotten about Mount Kai's death, but how could the major cultivators forget it? It must be fresh in his memory, and he must be brooding about it. Thus, in this special place, under the guidance of a person with no sense of direction, he completed this great mountain protecting formation. At that time, he only thought that if the Kong realm attacked, there would be a place for them to reorganize, gather, and rest. But this time, when the Kong realm attacked, their half-immortal old ancestor appeared. So the significance of the mountain protecting formation was not great. However, the person with no sense of direction still insisted that everyone retreat into the formation and make a bet with the Kong realm. In view of his prestige and connections on the Toulon formation for more than 1,000 years, this bet had been continued like this. From a quick death, it became a slow death. The Toulon cultivators were very dissatisfied because there was no way out with such a defense. They didn't believe that the people of the Kong realm would really keep their promise, and keep their promise of 100 years. Rather than being surrounded and defeated, it would be better to have a good fight. But this courage was suppressed by the person with no sense of direction. Suppressing it for dozens of years was also very tiring. The cultivators of the Kong realm were also dissatisfied. They thought that with the old ancestor, it would be easy to capture them, but in the end, good things were fraught with setbacks. It became a protracted battle, and they couldn't display much of their strength. They had too many misgivings, such as the Toulon spiritual vein, the heavy casualties that might be caused by a forceful attack, and the great increase in their cultivation strength if they accepted the surrender normally. All of these made them more willing to win this bet, even if it would take some time. All of these miraculously superimposed together formed the reason why the battle between the realms had been peaceful and dawdling for dozens of years. The funny thing was that the invaders were very satisfied because they had the possibility of taking over the entire Toulon formation. On the other hand, the passive side was dissatisfied because many of them would rather die standing. You can also live standing. Why not? If you want to fight to the death, you will always have such an opportunity. But before you lose hope, you still need to be patient. Patience is also an important quality of cultivation. The cultivators of the Toulon formation, who had no sense of direction, were already very annoyed. For more than 1,000 years, he had become the spiritual leader of the Toulon cultivation world. The cultivators believed in him, not only because of his profound cultivation theories and powerful combat ability, but also because of the endless yearning of the outer circle for the inner circle. They always felt that the inner circle was more superior than a mainstream cultivation world. But he didn't know how long he could suppress this hopeless passive defense. Now, only dozens of years had passed, not even half 100 years. If the formation was really broken, would these Toulon cultivators, who looked modest but had a strong nature, listen to him obediently and integrate into the orthodoxy of the Kongja world? He also couldn't tell them that his real intention was to pin his hopes on a certain unreliable guy, because he wasn't sure. The change came too fast, and he couldn't make proper arrangements. When he decided to defend the formation to the death, and, at the same time, send out cultivators to strengthen the layout of the high-density thunder pool, the agile cultivators of the Kongja world had already cut off their passage to the void. He could only pin his hopes on the young Yuanying Yun Xianxian, a little girl who had reached the nascent soul stage less than 20 years ago and had only been out of the universe a few times. Back then, the reason why he kept this little girl alive was because he wanted to play a prank on her. It was because he knew that although his friend's realm was very high, he had some perverted eyes that high-level cultivators didn't have. But now, it seemed that he was being too childish. A mission like this should be given to an experienced person, preferably a supreme. Otherwise, when that guy left, even a newbie like Yin Shanxian might not be able to sense it. Now, it was too late to regret. He could only bet the hope of an entire realm on a little girl who had reached the nascent soul stage less than 20 years ago. Even the mission itself wasn't very clear. He could only see if this little girl was smart or not. There was nothing he could say about this. In the inner circle of the universe's void, there are countless similar realm wars. Some of them perish together, and some choose to submit. This doesn't mean anything. Personally, I admire your determination, but must be meaningful. Only when all hope is far away from us will we consider this last step. That's why I said that patience is very important. Be like a tiger in battle, and be like a tortoise when enduring. Only by doing this will you have the qualifications to survive in the cultivation world of the universe. Chapter 2442. This formation of Toulon is truly amazing. I don't know where they got this kind of cultivator from, but he delayed our plan by several decades. If it weren't for the Patriarch personally overseeing it this time, I'm afraid this expedition would have ended in failure. The formation is dead, but people are alive. The formation is indeed amazing, but that Taoist is also very impressive. No matter how many times he dealt with it, there wasn't much of a mistake. If it weren't for him, this formation could have been broken in 10 years. Why wait until today? With the Patriarch taking action, I don't think it will take much longer. There are only a few layers left in this formation. It's useless no matter who comes. It's just that when the formation is broken, these Toulon cultivators might not be willing to keep their promise. Outside the mountain-protecting formation, hundreds of cultivators were densely packed in the sky. In the center was an old man with a sage-like demeanor. He was the realm-suppressing patriarch of the Kongjia world, Xiaoguan. The entire Kongjia world had relied entirely on his own strength in the past 10,000 years. It could be said that he represented the Kongjia world. His words carried weight, and he was a man of his word. The perfected lords of the Kongjia world surrounded the patriarch. They were flattering him and learning some practical skills at the same time. Over the past few decades, the formation that they couldn't decipher had gradually revealed its true colors under the ancestors' painstaking efforts. They knew that the ancestor had deliberately slowed down in order to let them learn more things. With such an ancestor, why should they worry about not being able to achieve great things? Daoist Xiaoguan's expression was normal. Between his fingers, it was as if he was peeling off 1,000 layers of skin, peeling off another layer of the formation's protection. He chuckled and said, "This is already the 10001 SD anomaly of this formation. I've observed its momentum. The changes have ended, and there isn't much novelty to speak of. The opportunity to break the formation is today." Everyone cheered in unison, and all kinds of flattery rolled in. The old half-immortal smiled helplessly. Cultivators of our generation should have lofty ambitions. Every step and action must have a purpose. We can't just focus on what's in front of us. This is also the root of our Kongjia world's 4 transitions in the past 10,000 years. Everyone listened attentively. They knew that the patriarch liked to be a teacher, and there was indeed something real. It was not wrong to say a few nice words. The roots of this mountain-protecting formation come from the inner circle cultivation world. It's very extraordinary. I think it's also from the Orthodox Taoist sect. However, this person wasn't invited by the Toulons. He just happened to wander here by chance. It's just a coincidence, and it can't happen again. Seeing that the disciples around him were listening to him attentively, the old ancestor was very satisfied. In the past few decades, I've had several discussions with this person, so I vaguely know his background. It was a top-level higher realm of the Northern Elephant Heaven, and for some unknown reason, it had drifted here. However, although this person's orthodoxy domain was strong, it was nothing in the mainstream of the inner circle. Especially among the peak half-immortals, there were no particularly outstanding figures. Therefore, if I used my strength to suppress him, there would be no worries. You must be clear about this in the future. The world of cultivation is complicated and complicated. If we are not careful, we will offend someone we should not offend. Our behavior is not recognized in the mainstream world of cultivation. Therefore, we have to be especially careful and cautious. Otherwise, it will be too late for regrets when disaster strikes. The cultivators of the Kongjia realm bowed and accepted the teachings. Old Ancestor Guan sighed. If you don't walk into the mainstream, you will never know how big this universe is. Only with a humble heart can one go far. Don't think that just because you've succeeded 4 times, you'll continue to succeed in the future. The closer you are to the inner circle, the more cautious you have to be. This was a wise saying, and it was also the reason why they had been able to walk all the way without any accidents. Old Ancestor Guan waved his hand. Of course, wealth comes from danger. Nothing good will fall from the sky. If you don't fight for it, you won't have anything. Once the target is determined, you have to do your best and leave no room for leeway. Take this foreign yang god, for example. After our Kongjia realm wins the bet, others can live but not him. No matter where he comes from or what his roots are, only a dead person is the best enemy. In a mainstream world of cultivation, there is also such a domain called the 5 rings. Along the way, they plunder and rob. Now, it has become the wind vane of the change of epochs. Therefore, I say that plundering is not wrong. What's wrong is that you don't have the ability to do so. I hope that one day, our Kongjia realm's Taoist field can also command the wind and the clouds and spread our might throughout the universe. The cultivators of the Kongjia realm were in high spirits. In the past 10,000 years, they had vaguely formed a certain temperament, an aggressive temperament. However, this temperament still needed to be settled and polished. Feeling that the time had come, Old Ancestor Guan stood up. I deliberately slowed down the speed of breaking the formation for 3 reasons. First, this person does have some ability and is not an ordinary person. On the Great Tao, you must remember to never underestimate your opponent, even if their realm is lower than yours. Second, it can let you learn the way of breaking the formation more clearly. I have already demonstrated the various changes in it for decades. If you still can't learn it, it can only mean that you are not cut out for cultivation. You can't blame anyone. Third, it is a psychological attack. If you break the formation too quickly, it will be easy to arouse their desire to resist. In a life and death struggle, there will be too many unnecessary injuries. Although they still won't bow their heads and admit defeat now, I'm afraid they will still struggle after losing the bet. However, decades have passed, and with the oath of the bet, how much determination can they have even if they struggle? The cultivators of the Kongjia realm were convinced. As long as the old ancestor was here, they would have good days ahead. However, what if the old ancestor was gone one day? Just like before, when he suddenly disappeared for 2,000 years. Although they didn't dare to ask, it wasn't a good thing. The old ancestor was now a 4th blight powerhouse and still had a few thousand years of lifespan. Hopefully, there would be someone among them who could replace him. The old ancestor of the lower pass soared into the sky, and a large group of Kongjia realm cultivators followed closely behind. They came to the top of the formation and tightly blocked the sky. The lower pass waved his hand, and a concave formation appeared out of thin air in the sky. His voice resounded throughout the realm as he laughed. Breaking the formation for decades is actually as easy as waving my hand. I have given you enough face, and I have also done my best in the Battle of Realms. However, there is no such thing as kindness in cultivation. I have given you face, but have you given me face? In fact, waving his hand was a little boastful. Under the premise that the spirit veins were not damaged, it was really difficult for him to solve it with a wave of his hand. However, after decades of thorough research, breaking the formation was really as easy as waving his hand to him now. The foreplay was over, and time had passed. Now was the time to boost the morale of the Kongjia realm. Breaking the formation in one go was the best way. The concave formation was embedded downwards, and the formation was reversed. Like the autumn wind sweeping away fallen leaves, The formation that came from the mainstream cultivation world's orthodox Taoist sect disappeared under the huge gap between realms. Inside the formation, the faces of the Toulon cultivators were all ashen. They no longer had any concealment. The old ancestor of the lower pass shook his sleeves. "What do you all say?" One of the Toulon cultivators stood out, his face full of helplessness as he shook his head repeatedly. This friend of his was already a few thousand years old, but he still liked to pretend so much. He had to drag the matter of solving the problem to the end. He said lazily, Say chicken feathers. Look back and tell me what you have to say." Chapter 2443. The cultivators from the Kongjia world were amused. "Is this a street fight in the mortal world? You hit me with a brick every time I turn my head?" The patriarch of the lower pass was indifferent. His senses were so sensitive that he could sense all the cultivators within a certain range. Therefore, he was sure that there was no one behind him who could threaten him. It was just the Yuanying of the Kongjia world's perfected cultivators. However, the hundreds of Saturn cultivators who were facing him were all surprised and excited. Was it because they were happy? They were all acting so well. It didn't seem like they were faking it. Did the Saturnians change their profession to stage plays? They weren't acting. They really saw it. For a moment, everyone understood why the person with a poor sense of direction insisted on stalling for time. It was not meaningless persistence, but waiting for the legendary figure he mentioned. Before the cultivators from the Kongjia world invaded, almost everyone here had been to the thunder pool of high density and stayed with the person with a poor sense of direction for a short time. In fact, it was not for the legendary figure, but to keep the person with a poor sense of direction. Now, the good news was that the legendary figure was finally here. The crisis of Toulon was probably not a problem. They were all half immortals, so they had to respect each other, right? The bad news was that since the legendary figure was here, the person with a poor sense of direction would leave. The Kongjia world was trying its best to get into the inner circle of the universe. If there was a mainstream cultivation environment, who would be willing to waste their time in such a remote place like Toulon? But this was not what they needed to consider at the moment. They were now excited that they could finally see a battle of the highest level in the human cultivation world. The patriarch of the lower pass was very calm because he believed in his senses, but he could do it without turning his head. But the Yuanying perfected cultivators under his command couldn't do it. Once there was a first, there would be a second. While gasping in surprise, a perfected cultivator quietly reminded him, "Patriarch, there are really two people behind us, pretending to be mysterious." It seemed that if he didn't teach them a lesson, they wouldn't stop playing tricks like this. The patriarch of the lower pass couldn't ignore the warning from the disciple beside him. He slowly turned his head, as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. There were two people, but in fact there was only one. The Yuanying was not worth mentioning. Although he was not familiar with this person, he was very familiar with him. In the exterior realm, in the land of the Yellow Dragon, there was no one who did not know of him. He couldn't understand why this god of death would appear here. It didn't make any sense. The universe was so big, and the outer circle was so vast. The human population was sparse, and it was a cultivation desert. However, he understood extremely clearly that everything was over, including the expansion of Kongming realm, as well as himself. The cultivators of the Kongjia realm also realized something, but they did not realize how serious the threat was. At most, it would be a half-immortal. With the old ancestor's fourth blight ability, wouldn't it be easy to deal with him? Among the people present, perhaps only Lu Xiaoyi and Xiaoguan could truly understand what was going on. Perhaps even someone with a poor sense of direction could understand something. However, the thousands of true immortals and nascent souls on both sides did not understand. Excitement began to ripple through their bodies. The boring attack and defense of the formation had tortured them for decades. Now, They were finally going to have an evenly matched battle. This was the best ending. It was a perfect ending. Saturn's history would forever record this heavy stroke as a legacy. Xiaoguan couldn't defend himself, and there was suffering. The matter was clearly laid out here. Any explanation would be superfluous. It was better not to explain and wait for the judgment of fate. Lu Xiaoyi was almost done with his pretense. He ignored Yun Qianqian, who was trembling with excitement or fear, and said lightly, "Before the new era, harmony was precious. It's better to fight less and follow the will of heaven. Children, it's better to go back. The void is endless and unpredictable. As for you, you should end your own life. It's also considered as us working together in the exterior realm. Aren't these words too arrogant? You want a fourth blight mighty person to end his own life with just one sentence. Do you think you're an immortal? Even immortals need to listen to other people's explanations, right? Is this a bluff?" Nearly 1,000 cultivators were suspicious and amused by the stranger's big words. They didn't know how he was going to end this. However, as one of the main characters, Xiaoguan, who is also a half-immortal, bowed solemnly. "Thank you for your understanding. If you can't do it, you'll be punished. I'll make some arrangements, and then I'll be on my way." He waved his hand and called the cultivators of the Kongjia world together. He had a relieved expression on his face. He knew that he would have such a day sooner or later, but he didn't expect to meet this person. Any resistance was superfluous and would only bring about a destructive blow to the power of the Kongjia world. This was proven by countless events in the history of cultivation in the past 2,000 years. Looking at the disciples who were still confused, he smiled bitterly and said, "My path is over, but yours is just the beginning. You have to pay attention to every word I say and remember it carefully. You can't disobey." After a while, Xiaoguan finished his arrangements. In front of nearly 1,000 cultivators from both sides, he didn't show them any extraordinary Taoist skills or fierce battle. Instead, he showed them the grandest and most beautiful fireworks in history. So, this is how a half-immortal's Taoism dissipates? Under the stunned gazes of the cultivators of the Kongjia world, the cultivators of the Kongjia world collected the remains of their ancestor, saluted, and left silently. They were ordered to give up the transition plan for 10,000 years, destroy the space passage, and never be enemies with Toulon. This was what Xiaoguan taught them with his life. No one dared to ignore it, because their ancestors said that they had failed in their mission. Everything they did was under the eyes of the mainstream of cultivation. There was no chance for them to escape. This ordinary Taoist represented the mainstream, the future, the cruel world of cultivation, and the cruel reincarnation of the heavenly Tao. Lu Xiaoyi watched them leave. He kept his promise and didn't attack. The outer circle was vast and isolated from the world of cultivation. It wasn't a good thing to have no natural enemies at all. Keeping the Kongjia world was also a form of training for the people of Saturn. Humans, if there was no danger hanging behind them, it would be easy for them to become lazy and slack. They would lack creativity and motivation. From this point of view, the Kongjia realm still had its value. Even someone as powerful as the Fifth Ring kept finding different opponents for himself, no matter if it was the inner circle or the outer circle, let alone the small Toulon world. None of the cultivators of the Toulon world dared to move. They were the main characters, but when the legend arrived, they became background characters without exception. They didn't even have the right to say anything. The world of cultivation always belonged to the high-level cultivators. Lu Xiaoyi turned around and opened his arms. "Ha, slug, you're really tough. I thought you were already dead. I even drank a cup of wine for you during the Qingming festival and shed a few tears. I didn't expect that when the tiger isn't home, you're the monkey that's the king." The directionally challenged person also opened his arms and laughed. "One ear, you didn't die even after doing all this. Why should I die before you? We're friends, so I have to keep my body intact and be ready to arrange your funeral at any time. Every Qingming festival, I'll send you a few more beauties." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.